and look at that. Wow. 1 second, everyone. Just gotta go in through and pop this thing up again. Let's see. New window. Sorry about that, everyone. I'm gonna tell y'all why this is happening in just a second, but unfortunately, we've had a little bit of trouble here. But the reason why is because tonight we actually hooked up a second desktop. We found a monitor just laying around the house, and so we went and threw it up. And so it looks like it had a little bit of a glitch there for a second, but nonetheless, we've gotten it fixed. So, hey everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and today we're here to talk about the Day 54 and Day 55 news. Pretty much the past 48 hours in a nutshell. Before we move on, once again, I'm going to touch on, we got a new desktop little screen over here to the side, and that's how I'm able to see everyone's comments now, and that's why I've been responding so much. So I'm actually going to be looking over there every once in a while, and I'm actually going to be able to see y'all's comments live for the first time ever on stream, like 55 days in, surprisingly. But anyways, moving on from that, we're going to talk about today's schedule. But before we do, I'm actually going to hand it over to Matthew real quick, so that way he can talk about some things with the channel. So with that, let's hit it, Matthew.
Okay, and we just want to mention to everybody that the merch store is still up. So if you want to go check out our merch store, it is over at enforcerstore.com. As always, and once again, it is good to be back with you all once more. Just so everybody knows, we did finish the last fundraiser at about $21,000, so that was well above goal. And I want to thank everybody again tonight for being here for that fundraiser.
And I've got a recap on that as well, and thank you very much, Matthew. We hit $21,000 on the last fundraiser. That is the third largest fundraiser we've ever done on this channel, which is amazing to me. And I thought it was, I think it was one that was most deserving to be that high up, because the support was actually going to a pretty much veterans foundation in Ukraine, which, that's something that I think was never covered. And I'll say it again. A lot of people have been talking about getting these soldiers arms and equipment for the here and the now, but no one's talking about giving these soldiers anything for the times beyond the war. And that's something that's always overlooked. Even here in the United States, there is always gripes about the VA, because they're always trying to strike down people and getting benefits and saying that, your knee replacement surgery isn't service related, and your hearing loss isn't service related, and all kinds of stuff like that. And it's always an international issue. It's really a cross-cultural issue that veterans are never really taken care of all too well, although their sacrifice is the entire reason that the nation was able to live on. And so I'm very glad that we got a huge fundraiser amount for them. It was twice the amount that we originally went into as a goal, and I don't know who did the $5,000 donation. Got to say that again. We have no clue who did that. But whoever it was, if it was YouTube, if it was some power from above like Elon or someone like that, I don't know. All I know is that I'm very thankful to everyone who donated that night, because we got a load of help out to the people who count, the soldiers. Moving on from that, I have seen some people asking about the video we're making, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, just a little bit. I'm not going to try and spoil too much about it, because I still want it to be a surprise. But right now, the filming date has been pushed back again. That's because we've entered the finals week, and while the plan was to go film Thursday, we were like, oh crap, well, it's like that's like in the middle of two finals for me, and I was like, I got to write up an essay on that day, so that's been pushed back into next week. But since we've been talking about it for so long, I don't want to keep everyone like, what the hell is it? So I'm just going to say kind of what it is. It's revolving around nuclear in a way. So I'm just going to leave it at that. It's something related to the concept of nuclear. I'm going to leave it at that, because if I say anything else, it's going to kind of tell y'all exactly what it is. So it's focusing on nuclear. But with that, we're now going to move on to tonight's schedule. First off, we're going to be covering the news and the location unknowns, and also in the Kyiv area. We've gotten a very small amount, and most of it's actually in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Well, actually, the only bit of news from that area is in the exclusion zone. We will then move from the location unknowns to the Kharkiv and Donbass area, and in between, we'll answer 3 to 5 questions from the chat. Then we'll cover the area of Kharkiv and the Donbass. We will then move on down into the southern front, which will include Mariupol today, which will be its own section. And so while we segment over from the Donetsk area to Mariupol, we'll answer 3 to 5 more questions from the chat. And then finally, we'll cover this area and the rest of the country, and then we'll go back to questions for the rest of the night. Y'all don't know how weird it is to actually see that screen going like 1,000 miles an hour to me, to the left of me. That's actually really weird. So bear with me tonight if I get a little distracted, because that's really weird. I've never had that before. So anyways, without further ado, without too much padding and all that stuff, we're going to get straight into the news. First off, we've known this for quite a long time, but we have gotten more footage of this today, of Russian fortifications that were built in the exclusion zone. These in the video were not built in the Red Forest. They were built elsewhere in the exclusion zone, but nonetheless, the entire exclusion zone is highly radioactive. According to this video, the actual area that was fortified was right near the massive equipment dump that they made during, you know, pretty much the liquidators' time cleaning up the place, where they left all of the radioactive, like, trucks and equipment and such that couldn't be brought back out of the zone because they would be pretty much flying radioactive cancer machines. So anyways, I'm going to show you all this video. It's incredibly interesting. Unfortunately, I have to mute it because everyone's putting copyrighted music on everything these days. But nonetheless, you can see here that the fortifications they dug in the exclusion zone were incredibly large. Look at that. There's actually a hold-down dugout for a tank right there, which is pretty large. And they had to dig that entire thing out either by machine, well, probably by machines, not by hand, I'm assuming. But still, you know that kicked up a huge amount of radiation, considering that the exclusion zone is highly radiated still to this day. So as when you see the drone is just panning through all of the fortifications that they made. Look at this massive one. That thing has got to be at least 80 feet long, about 10 feet wide maybe, and about maybe 15 feet deep at its deepest. And they had to dig that entire thing out, and all of that soil was radioactive. And once it got pushed around, all of that radioactive dust and particles got kicked up into the air, got all over these soldiers. They breathed it in. I mean, like, this was a huge blunder right here. This was a huge disaster and a catastrophe. And honestly, I don't really think any of them got enough radiation to be dead on the spot. You know, they're not getting like 5,000 millisieverts of radiation, which is the lethal dose. But they're probably getting enough to get leukemia and radiation poisoning and all kinds of other nasty things that will probably kill them over the course of the next few years. So I don't think any of the ones who got deployed into the Chernobyl zone, the exclusion zone, are well off anymore, for sure. That's one thing that we can say with certainty. Also, I'd like to answer a question, since I can see this in the chat, from Nicholas Rodriguez, who says, how can the trees live in radiation? Most of them don't. Most of them were kind of mummified where they were, and that's why the red forest is red. The leaves died, but due to the trees pretty much being killed from the inside out and all of their cells pretty much ceasing to function, they didn't drop the leaves off of the trees, so they're all dead. But they look somewhat alive, like it's autumn in there in the red forest. In this particular video, we are seeing a couple of green trees, which is interesting to me. For as far as I knew, trees weren't able to grow in most parts of the zone. So that's kind of an answer to that. I hope y'all do like that. I can answer some questions on the fly. But it's good to know, once again, that the radiation was only 3.6 Roentgen. Not great, not terrible. So I'm sure that these soldiers didn't suffer too much harm. I'm just kidding. The place is radiated to hell. I'm sure that they are probably very bad off even right now, probably having to probably vomiting all over the place now that they've been sent back into Belarus, and they're probably actually quarantining those troops from the rest of them, and probably, I don't know, that's kind of placing a lot of an idea of competence on the Russian military. But I was saying maybe they have also cordoned off the equipment, but then again, that's asking too much from the Russians. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, which is actually not in the Kyiv area, so we're going to move out of the Kyiv area, and we're going to move to the location unknowns. Just for everyone who may be new to the stream tonight, I want to cover what the colors mean. The colors signify the day. Each of these colors, the olive, yellow, and red, are all separate days. The blue and the dark gray are the ones we're covering today. The blue is day 54, so that's yesterday. Day 55, which is in dark gray, is the news we got today. I'm not really going to say that all too much, and if you would like to take a look at the map, there is a little legend here in the top left corner that does kind of lay out the colors and what they mean. Unfortunately, green is not on this map, which is day 50. Due to some technical errors, day 50 got deleted. So without further ado, we're just going to go straight to the location unknown news. First off, on day 54, we saw a Russian tank run over a wounded Russian infantryman. Now, this is not odd, really, honestly. Tanks actually run over infantry commonly in a lot of armies, because tanks are very hard to see out of, so having personnel around a tank is just a dangerous situation in and of itself. But what's very odd about this is that this infantry wasn't standing behind the tank where it was impossible to see them. He was actually in front of the tank, which then ran him over. So I think the driver saw him, but just continued to drive forward. I can't really tell. That's a lot of speculation and assumptions. And it's not a graphic video. You can just see the little splotch where the guy is, and then you can just see the tank roll over him. It's bizarre. It's a really freak occurrence. But anyways, here's the video. I'm going to rewind it real quick so that way we can point out the fella. The fella is this little black dot right here, right under the play button. So I'm going to click play, and I'm just going to let y'all see how messed up this was. I haven't seen anything like this, and it was bizarre. And see, it just runs over him. I'm going to stop it there because I don't know if it will be considered graphic if I play afterwards. You still can't see much. But you can see that the front of the tank was facing towards this guy on the ground. Which means the driver probably saw him, because we go back to here. You can see that that guy is probably well within the view of the driver's periscopes, and nonetheless, it looks like the guy aimed for him. Look at that. That's wild. That's something. I don't really know what to say about that. I'm just going to let y'all see that for what it is, and we're just going to move on from that because there's really nothing to comment on it. Anyways, moving on to the next bit of news, we can see Ukrainian SPG at work in this video. We can actually see an interior shot of it as well here, which is all very interesting. We don't see a lot of this kind of footage from either side, and so it's just a rare look at the actual inner workings of one of the SPGs. So here's the video.
Допуск. Ого. Боже, це дурне.
Seems like they're having a lot of fun with their job. But anyways, that pretty much shows you the inner workings of it. What was also really interesting is that it looks like... Let's take a look at this again. You know what's weird is that there's a bit of a flash that comes out of the breach. Something I've never really noticed before when watching these videos, but still something interesting to note nonetheless. I'll show it again. Right there. That was really interesting. Anyways, not much to comment on that video, just showing the inner workings of an SPG. Looks like they were having a pretty fun time just laughing and giggling in there while they were firing the SPG. Kind of a weird thing to do, but I'm not one to judge. Anyways, we're moving on to the next video. Well, actually, I am one to judge, usually when the Chechens are doing something in Mariupol. But anyways, I'm going to show some Ukrainian BM-27s in action, which are some of the larger versions of the MLRS systems that the Ukrainians have in their inventory. So here's the video of that. You can see 3 of them here in this field. And I'm just going to let it play.
Визначено кількість снарядів по супостату. Залпом огонь!
So with that, that's the end of that video. Once again, it's just MLRS is firing. We've seen this a lot, but it's still good to show. So with that, I'm just going to leave that there, and we're going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see Russian armor destroyed by Ukrainian artillery. We've seen loads of this, but once again, it's always good to see, because it does show us that the Ukrainians are inflicting a large amount of damage on Russian armor daily in this war, and these videos continue to bolster that fact and continue to show it. So I'm going to let y'all see the video. It's got copyrighted music, got to mute it. But you can see here that the Russian forces are dug into this tree line occasionally. And you can see the artillery raining down almost precisely on the tree line, which is very impressive. Usually artillery has a kind of decent spread on it, but as you can see here, they are deadly close. Like, the dispersion of this is like an oval shape, but right on the tree line instead of a large circle, like you would imagine most artillery barrages to be like, which is very impressive to see. As far as we know, watching Russian footage, their barrages do imitate heavily that typical circular dispersion that artillery usually has when it's fired in a barrage. But whenever we see the Ukrainians operating artillery, like right there, it's pinpoint accurate and actually falling directly onto the Russian vehicles. We can see one of them there just went up because it got hit directly. And we can see that these shells are still falling incredibly close, within feet of these Russian tanks, and sometimes, like we just saw previously, directly on top of them. And you've got to give it to the Ukrainian artillery crews. Their accuracy is pinpoint. We can see that another tank just went up. And now it looks like we're seeing the actual side shot of the tree line that they're in. And now it looks like the entire field is ablaze with either fragments of Russian armor or the shrapnel of the artillery shells, if there's some kind of incendiary shell that are still burning on the ground. Or it could be anything, really, as far as I know. But I'm going to let the video continue for the last few seconds. Also, I was going to ask Matthew, does this look like the control thing for our drone? But the video's got a 20-second lag for him as well, so I don't think he'll be able to see it in time. So we're going to move on from this to the next video. The next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russians reloading an Iskander. Now, this is really rare footage, and this was something I put on deliberately because it's incredibly interesting to see, because I've always wondered, how did they reload those missiles onto those mobile launch platforms? And in this video, we actually see how, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. We're just going to get straight into the video and take a good look at it. So here we can see the Iskander launcher rounding the corner into this muddy field. You can tell that the Rasputitsa is clearly in season here, but it looks like it's dried out enough that they're actually able to move the vehicles on the fields a little bit, specifically this one. So now we can see it moving up to the reloading vehicle. Now we can hear this guy giving an interview. It's really quiet for me, so I bet it's very quiet for y'all. Anyways, now we can see, this is really interesting to me. Apparently the reloading vehicle, which makes logical sense, but I've never seen it in action to know what it actually looks like, but it has a crane on it, and it lifts the Iskander out of pretty much its truck bed, and then they spin it around, and then they pretty much place it inside of the silo. It's a very, very interesting thing to see. Look, they're just like spinning the missile, the ballistic missile, with some wires on the ground. So now they've pretty much gotten it almost all the way down into the silo. And now we can actually see the Iskander, pretty much the Iskander mobile silos in action here as they're lifting the Iskanders upwards to then fire them. So now you can see it launching. And that is the somewhat interesting and very simple process compared to what I thought it would be to reload an Iskander ballistic missile onto the mobile launch platforms. That is just very interesting to me, at least from a mechanical perspective. Much like the Stugna, well, not the Stugna, I'm sorry, the Sturm S is very interesting mechanically. If y'all want to check that out, make sure to go back to a few days ago in the stream, and I actually showed a pretty in-depth, detailed video on how the Sturm works, which is a Russian anti-tank, anti-tank destroyer, anti-tank armored personnel carrier. Not really sure exactly what you would want to call it, but nonetheless, they're very interesting systems mechanically. So we're now going to move on to our last bit of location unknown news for day 54, where we can see a Ukrainian in-law team in action. In-laws in general are very tough to deal with, and if the Ukrainians are fielding in-laws, they've got to be something. So here's the video. So we can hear that the first in-law launched. Unfortunately, we couldn't see it on film. We can now see that he's doing something with his in-law. He's now picking it back up by the carry strap, it seems. Well, no, actually, we can hear that the in-law in front of him launched again.
Попав, братан, блядь, побігли нахуй.
And so now they're taking off. And so now they're running off into the distance. They fire 2 in-law missiles. I don't know if they hit. Unfortunately, we couldn't see any of that in the video. But you got a generally good idea of how fast the anti-tank teams operate. They run up to position. They prepare the shot. They fire a couple, and then they turn around and they run away as fast as they got there. That's an incredibly good way to fight a war. Of course, some people think you stand there and fight like a man or something. But in war, the goal is to not die. And so running away is an incredibly good way of not dying. So with that, very interesting video. And so we've actually covered all of the location unknowns for day 54, which now leads us into day 55, which are the dark gray markers. Starting off on day 55, we can see Ukrainian soldiers taking fire inside of a building. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find out where this is, but I'm assuming it's definitely not Mariupol, considering the condition of the building is actually somewhat reasonable. Anyways, here's the video.
Ой-ой-ой. Ой-ой-ой.
You can hear that is just dangerously close, almost on top of their building. Sonia Blade just commented, it's crazy to see a modern war through TikTok. I have to agree, it's very bizarre that an entertainment platform is actually the way we're seeing a lot of this war footage. But with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see that apparently this chocolate is the bomb. This Ukrainian soldier is under artillery barrage from the Russians, and he continues to eat this chocolate bar. I think that whoever this chocolate bar is made by just got a free sponsorship from this dude, because it is so good that he doesn't stop eating it. So I'm just going to let y'all see the video. It's kind of a funny one in a way. So here it is. So you can hear the artillery going off, and this man, he's enjoying his chocolate.
Слава Україні.
Pretty funny video, I would like to know actually what kind of chocolate that is. It honestly looks a little bit like a Hershey's, but I don't eat enough chocolate to really know the shape of them apart, so sadly I can't really say. It may even be a Ukrainian chocolate bar, but nonetheless, they just got a free sponsorship if anyone can find out the brand of chocolate that he was eating, because that guy likes it so much that even under a barrage, he's not going to stop eating. He's going to keep on snacking. Anyways, with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see an unfortunate Russian night raid on Ukrainian forces. I make sure to include all the footage I can, including footage that does show that the Ukrainians do suffer losses here and there, because I believe it's critically important to know that while the war is generally going in Ukraine's favor, they do, of course, suffer losses like every normal military will. So I'm going to let y'all see the video. It's just, you know, of course, a grayscale drone footage video of striking Ukrainian forces that are apparently in the small village. And you can see one of their vehicles went up. And now we can see that it appears that that ordnance, I believe it may have been a bomb, struck somewhere in the backyard of a house. But nonetheless, it looks like the Ukrainians did take a few losses there. But as of right now, with the situation that we do know of on the ground, we know that the Ukrainians are still holding incredibly well, even with the Russian counterattack. Well, not really the Russian counterattack, the new Russian offensive in the south, well underway at this point, with about 24 hours under its belt. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see more good news, and we can see the Ukrainians destroying a Russian tank. So here's the video of that real quick. It's of course pretty standard, you know, you just see the Ukrainians performing excellence in a way just all the time. That one went up like a Roman candle. And I'm going to assume that tank will not be operable throughout the rest of the war, considering that it's taken some pretty serious damage right there. So anyways, that's the end of that video. Not really much to comment on there. Once again, we're seeing the Ukrainians managing to destroy invading forces' armored vehicles. Incredibly good to see. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we see Ukrainian artillery slamming the Russians as usual. The Ukrainian artillery seems to be doing a pretty decent amount of good. Let me make sure that that isn't just a repeat of the last video. It is actually a repeat of the last video with slightly different footage. As you can see, it's kind of focusing more on the right side. I don't know if they had two drones up or what, but it was different enough for me to say that they were two different bits of footage. But I'm not going to bore y'all with watching the same thing twice. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see a Ka-52 guarding over an Mi-8 that has landed somewhere in an intersection and is apparently evacuating wounded Russian soldiers. So I'm going to let y'all see that real quick. It's an interesting video, and it also appears to have been taken by another helicopter or a drone. But you can see the Mi-8 right down there where my mouse is circling, and you can also see the Ka-52 orbiting where this Mi-8 has landed, as it appears that they are actually loading up Russian wounded. We can also see a second one over there on the right side of the screen, which shows us that apparently there's a sizable amount of wounded. I don't know how many stretchers an Mi-8 can hold, but I'm going to assume that there's probably around at least more than 10 wounded soldiers being loaded onto both of those helicopters or more. Hopefully someone can get a more correct number in the chat, because I'm not particularly sure the capacity of an Mi-8. Alan asked, is there, let's see, oh, one second, I want to make sure I answered that one. That was pretty decent. Is there anything left of personnel in the tank when it goes up? It depends, really. It depends on one of two factors. Was the hit somewhere in a non-critical compartment? Like if it's somewhere more towards the front, near the driver's compartment, it may actually be the case that the commander and the gunner may survive, although they may be mortally wounded or lightly wounded. It just kind of depends. If it's hitting on the ammo carousel, which is directly under the turret basket, that means that they're all probably dead instantly. And there's also the fact of depressurization. There is a little bit of a cabin pressure that is inside of a tank compartment. And also, when anything explodes inside of a tank, the explosions are forced to the easiest spots for their energy to escape. And the easiest spots for them to escape is the crew hatches. And so that pretty much means that all of the force of anything that catches on fire or explodes inside of a tank is being directed upwards at the crew and straight out the hatches above them. So that's kind of the answer to that. But with that, we're going to move on to the last two bits of Location Unknown News. First off, we can see, this is a funny video, Russians' last words when a farmer steals their tank. I found this video pretty much while surfing around. It was pretty funny, and it kind of does summarize what I think one of them would be saying. So I'm going to unmute this real quick and put it at the start because it's kind of funny. Anyways, here's the video. So, anyways, that's the end of that video. That's pretty much what I'm thinking the Russians are probably saying every time they find out that one of their vehicles has been stolen. They're just yelling "Tractor" because that thing just stole pretty much half of their army's forces overnight. Anyways, moving on to the last bit of location unknown news, we can see more evidence of Russian destroyed logistics in these pictures. Here we can see Ukrainian flag put on a brand new Euro 4320, it seems, with an extended cab. Now, you know, that's a pretty nice upgrade. Moving on from that, we can also see more destroyed Euro 4320s, it seems. Some of them in worse conditions than others, but certainly unusable by the Russian side. This, of course, does hurt the Russian logistics a fairly good amount, considering that these small little nickel and dime destructions of Russian vehicles, you know, 3 at a time, 4 at a time or so, has built up to be around 1,400 logistics trucks in total, which tells you that the Russian logistical forces have taken a massive hit to their capacity and their abilities. And so with that, we have actually covered all of the location unknown news. Hope y'all enjoyed it a pretty good bit. And while we move on to the Kharkiv and Donbass news, we're going to take 3 to 5 questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so first up, we have a $50 donation from Panama, who says, with the Russian BTGs so damaged from the war so far, do you think the new Russian advance will be even less effective than the attacks before in the north?
Yes, I think they're going to be far less effective. First off, because now they're trying to do the same thing that they did in the north, which is clump up their forces into large groups that have to have a large supply line to keep them running. We know that there's at least 25 BTGs in one area around Izyum, which tells us that that is a massive number of troops. Going off of the normal number for a BTG, which is 800 troops per each one, that means there is 18,000 troops in that small area around Izyum, which tells me that they're going to have to require, golly, like, I can't even really say, honestly, because I'd have to go through and do the logistics numbers all over again like I did the first time I made those numbers. But I can tell you that 22 BCGs, it would be somewhere around, I believe, if I'm correct, like 10% of their initial invasion force in one spot. So you can imagine the logistical stress that's being put onto the army trying to supply 25 BTGs, 22 to 25 of them in that one area. I do think it'll be largely ineffective, not just because of that. They also have picked the rainy season as a whole to invade in, so we know that the Rasputitsa is still kicking in down there in the south. The rains have come over the lands over the past week, and so the ground has become very muddy and very slushy again. And we do know that they have apparently conducted their renewed offensive down here within the last 48 hours. So once again, it's really poor timing and poor planning, and I think that's also going to work against them to a great degree in the oncoming offensives that they are now underway in. So I hope that answers the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And I just want to quickly thank Panama again for that very generous donation, and we very much appreciate it. And next up, we have a $22 donation from longtime channel supporter Speedbreak. He says, sorry I missed the last few days. What did I miss? Did any ships sink? Any generals dead? Any counteroffensives, etc.?
You didn't really miss much. I haven't known of any Russian generals dead, but just in case of it, if you've been missing things for a few days, the Moskva was sunk not too long ago. It was actually sunk fairly recently, within like the past 5 days, I believe, which is huge news. That was the Russian flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, which cost some $750 million to build at the time of its construction. Also, we don't know of any new Russian generals or high command officers that have been killed, but we do know that the Russians are conducting a offensive right now, and it looks like they're going for the plan I laid out in yellow. And I've got to say this: it's crazy to me how I'm sitting here in my room, and I've got to make it clear I do have no military experience, no prior service or anything like that. And I said the Russians are going to go for either this encirclement in yellow or this encirclement in yellow. And they went for this encirclement, where they're going to move down to Slovyansk and maybe meet up with troops that try to conduct a spearhead from Svitlodarsk up towards Slovyansk as well and try and create a large encirclement. It's crazy to me that the Russian plans are that obvious that I can just be sitting here on the computer every day and say, with a high degree of accuracy exactly what they're probably going to be doing within the next few days. That's probably also got me lined up for a Novichok poisoning or a suicide. So if either of those happen, just know that was not me. That was apparently someone else, the Russians or something, or Moscow Mike maybe. Maybe he's going to run down the street and get me. But anyways, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit. And with that, we're going to move on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to cover the Kharkiv news and the Donbass news as a whole.
And the last one of the segment goes to Dino Ress, who puts in a $20 donation and says, Flora and fauna are thriving in the Red Forest and exclusion zone absent human intervention. Humans appear to be much more susceptible to damaging effects of radiation than other life forms. Watch Wildlife Takeover on YouTube.
Oh, that's very interesting. I do know that it has become a huge, pretty much nature reservation. That's also the same, very interestingly enough, for the Korean demilitarized zone. Although it's not radiated, it is an incredibly dangerous place with the mines all throughout. And nonetheless, it seems to have become a nature preserve in its own right as well, as it's become the home to many rare and endangered species on the Korean peninsula. But anyways, I thank you so much for sharing that info, and I will try and take a look at that when I can. So I thank you very much for sharing that, and with that, we have reached the end of this question segment, and we will now cover the Kharkiv and Donbass news, and then the next question segment will be in between the transition from Donetsk to Mariupol. So with that, let's get to the Kharkiv news. Starting off today, we have seen the Russian tanks on the outskirts of the Kharkiv area getting brewed up like tea kettles, as usual. Here we can see that they're in kind of obvious defensive positions on the tree line as usual. You can see all the tanks highlighted in red there at the start of the video. And you can see all of their dugouts very clearly from drone footage. Also, it appears that the fields that they're in have been charred, which is an interesting thing to note. Anyways, we can just see the drone going around and getting really reconnaissance on the Russian forces that are there, probably trying to relay this information to artillery units so that way they can strike them incredibly effectively like we're seeing now. We can now see one of the tanks trying to back up out of the tree line. Of course, the smoke, of course, the filter on the tank looks to have been poorly maintained or incredibly old because it is emitting smoke, sorry, I'm butchering this, like a steam train. That tells me that the budget to keep these tanks running, I've said this a lot, but I want to say this to the new viewers, if you're not able to replace the filters consistently on a tank or any kind of vehicle, they start to smoke like that. You'll notice that on old lawnmowers as well, to kind of equate that to like general daily life things. If you have a really, really old lawnmower and you turn that thing up, and while you turn that thing on, it emits smoke because the filter is old. So you can see that on this tank as well. And it also appears that the Ukrainians just used a white phosphorus shell on that tree line because that clearly looks like a white phosphorus explosion to me. So that's interesting. I'm not going to... and here's one thing I want to say. Everyone... well, not everyone. There's a very small group of people that whenever I say anything like that and I just observe the situation and kind of like an unbiased view, they want to go, oh, the Ukrainians are the heroes, they would never use white phosphorus. Yeah, the Ukrainians are the heroes, but I can't deny what my eyes are seeing. That was a white phosphorus shell, and I can't really blame them though, because we never saw them using those first. We've only seen them using them after the Russians began to use white phosphorus on them. So when one side's breaking the rules of war and the other one does it in response, you really can't go, oh, that's terrible, we need to test it because it's wrong and that's wrong. You know, it's a war and they are trying to get the upper hand on the other side, and so that will lead both sides. Once one stoops down to a level of degeneracy in a way like the Russians did with their initial white phosphorus attacks, you'll see the Ukrainians return and do the same thing in kind, much like how in World War I, Germany was the first one to use chlorine gas, and then we saw the Western forces also begin to use chlorine gas and a wide variety of gases on the Germans. Anyways, I'm going to let the video continue. Now we can see the artillery barrage hitting very effectively on the tree line. We can see them hitting incredibly close to that dugout as well, where it looks like that armored vehicle is. And it does look like the dugout is protecting it fairly well because it has very large lips on both sides of the dugout. And so that is showing that is effective in stopping shrapnel blasts or artillery blasts in general from causing a large amount of damage. But that hit right there looked like it hit something because some metal fragments came popping out of that one. So we can see that the artillery strikes continue, and we can see that one of the tanks is brewing up inside of its dugout. And so with that, that is the end of this video. I'd also like to make a note that a lot of people are saying that it's probably a smoke shell, and maybe it is. But what's the point of a smoke shell air bursting? I mean, like, I'm not an expert on how smoke shells are used, but that does seem kind of odd that you would have a smoke shell burst in the air where the smoke would quickly dissipate. And also, I was going to go through this whole entire thing. But anyways, I don't know if it's white phosphorus or not. It looks like it to me. We've seen a lot of pictures of white phosphorus being used. Let's pull that up. Smoke shell picture. Let's see if we can get... Okay, not a smoke shell like that, but let's see if we can find... Okay, no. Smoke shell artillery. Let's see if we can get an answer with that. So that's a tank smoke discharger. That is another one. That does look a lot like what we saw. And that looks almost just like it. So it probably was. I probably was wrong there. But let me check something else. Phosphorus. Now, I may have spelled that really wrong. Sorry about that in advance. But you got to see where I'm kind of coming from, because they do look incredibly similar. That looks a lot like the last picture we saw of the smoke shell. So I don't really know. It could have been phosphorus, could have been smoke. Can't really tell. I'll probably err on the side of caution, since a lot of people in the chat may have some experience, and I may say that it probably was a smoke shell. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news inside of Kharkiv itself, where we can see, once again, damage being caused to the city through the Russian bombardments. As you can see here, Russian bombardment pretty much hit a food store, as usual, not a military target, an entirely civilian target, and destroyed it completely. You can even see the roof, sloping down with the air conditioner unit falling to the ground. So that's in typical Russian fashion. Of course, the targets are never military in their design. It's always a civilian target that they are hitting. And so with that, we've covered all the Kharkiv news, and we're now going to move on down towards Izyum, where today we've seen that the Ukrainians have managed to capture another T-72B3, this time in incredibly good condition, and it also has the ERA protective package, it seems, from out here on the sides of the tanks, which is actually a rare find. We haven't seen a lot of T-72B3s with that kind of protective system.
Воно нічого не записувало. То це ще не тільки почало записувати. Иди сюда! Спасайся, кто может! Кто не может? Эй, сбивай, сука! Занято!
While this video runs, since I actually can go onto another screen, I'm going to ask y'all a question with a poll. So I just put up a quick little poll for y'all so that way we can get some consensus in the community through a vote. Was it smoke or phosphorus? I would like to know. But nonetheless, you can just see it's a video of this T-72B3 that does appear to have someone climbing around in the commander's hatch, but it has been completely abandoned by Russian forces, and it is intact. You can also hear a firefight unfolding just off in the distance, which tells you that this may have been recently abandoned. And we can also see the guy in the turret apparently firing his AK at the enemy forces, which are still incredibly close, apparently, as far as we can see in this video. And so with that, we're now going to move out of the Kharkiv area. Wait, I'm sorry, we've already moved out of the Kharkiv area. We're now going to move on further south in the Donbass, and we're going to pass this area. We actually haven't heard a lot of news out of here, this area around Izyum in particular, which is very interesting to me, because this is actually where the Russian push is occurring. And I'll highlight it for y'all with a little line. It appears that the Russian push right now is extending in two directions from Izyum. It's moving down the P-79, and down this direction towards Brest-Kivka, from what I can tell. So we'll just call that line 170, and we'll highlight it in red. And then the other offensive that they're conducting appears to be going from down the P-79 and the M03, right in the yellow field that I highlighted a while ago. So we'll mark that in red as well. And so these look like the two main angles of attack from Izyum right now, as far as the news I've been able to collect, although we don't have a lot of video evidence to back that up. And so that does look like they are going for Slovyansk. They're not going to be going much further down this major roadway. I think that's just to give their main offensive a little bit of breathing room, so that way it's not on such a narrow road for such a long amount of time, and there will be a bit of land for them to fall back on if anything was to happen to any part of it that was, you know, detrimental or severe. And it does look like they're going straight for Slovyansk. If they manage to break through, which right now, I'll make another line. This is about to start getting really artistic looking. But the Russians have made it, as far as I've been able to collect, about that far over the past 48 hours or so. So we'll highlight that one in blue, so that way it's totally different. And so that's how far they've made it from what I can tell. And if they ever manage to actually conduct a successful breakthrough and rout or completely destroy the Ukrainian units they're up against and start moving towards Slovyansk, this would be a massive encirclement and a massive disaster for the Ukrainian army, because tens of thousands of soldiers, from what we know, are in this area. So I'm going to get rid of all these lines now. That's kind of like the explanation of what I know is going on right now in this offensive. And this seems to be the only location right now where a massive spearhead is occurring. There are smaller spearheads that are happening all across this front line, but right now, that's really the only spot where I can see anything sizable enough happening that it does catch major attention and require some focus. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the area around Severodonetsk, where we can see that the LPR forces are conducting mass artillery barrages at this moment, pretty much. And so with that, that's the end of that video, but you can see that it was a large artillery unit conducting that barrage. And so with that, I'm actually going to close the poll because it looks like we've had 971 votes, and it looks like 70% of y'all said it was a smoke shell. So we're going to go with that was a smoke shell. So that poll will end, and we're now going to move on to the next video where we can see LPR or DPR forces firing an MLRS as usual. We've seen a lot of this footage, but once again, this is showing that the amount of artillery activity in the past day is suggesting that the counterattack is well underway at this point. Because just like on the first days or so, the offensive was conducted with the support of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. Now we can see, since the war is kind of shifted in doctrine and direction, their offensive is being marked by the heavy usage of artillery. So with that, we're now going to close that off because we've seen a lot of those kinds of footage before, and we're now going to move on further down, more into DPR territory, where we can see on day 54 a pro-Russian mortar being used. So I'm going to let y'all see this video real quick. let me check that out again real quick. Did that guy... It looked like that guy was holding the very tip of the mortar shell. Did he kind of like throw that down? Let me know what y'all think in the chat, because to me, it looks like the guy kind of threw it down the tube in a way. Right there, not really, actually. Didn't look like it. And so with that, that is the end of that video. Pretty self-explanatory. It's just a mortar in action. Nothing really exciting or very interesting. But now we're going to move on down towards the Donetsk area, where we've gotten some news from today on day 55. Starting off, we've seen the DPR hit Ukrainian positions in the Donbass, somewhere around the Donetsk region, but I'm not particularly sure where. So the marker isn't exactly accurate of where this was, but nonetheless, you can see the Ukrainian infantry running around in the series of houses, and you can actually see the artillery raining down incredibly close to them. Actually, that one was right on them. Hopefully no one was injured there. It actually, surprisingly, it looked like no one got killed with that almost direct artillery impact. And they all got up. It looked like they were a little dazed maybe, but they all got up and kept running. That's what I could see in that video. I don't know if that's a... I mean, like, I can't see anybody. Look, even the last guy got up and he was running off. I don't know if that was a miracle or something, but I didn't see a single person get killed in that direct hit, which was really surprising. But nonetheless, you could see that the DPR is pretty effective, actually, in that video in their artillery barrages. About as effective as the Ukrainians, because their artillery barrages were landing almost directly on that infantry unit. So with that, that's the end of that video. And we're now going to move on a little bit further down the line to the town of Pisky, I think. Where we can see that a firefight occurred today in between the Ukrainians and the DPR forces. I'm going to have to mute that video, of course, because it has music. Let me check again. Okay, it doesn't now. So this is footage from the Ukrainian perspective, and you can now hear that the firefight has just started. So now you can see that they're hiding inside of this destroyed structure. Not exactly sure what this is. It kind of looks like a farm in a way. Hang on. I'm sorry. For some reason today, I went and got a video from 2014. We're going to skip through this video because I just saw someone in the chat say that. It's a good thing I got the chat now because I saw that. And for some reason in my head today, I was like, oh, look, it happened today because it was 9 hours ago and I didn't look at the date. So sorry about that, but we're going to move on from that video to the news that I got today, but unfortunately I didn't have any video evidence for, is that the Ukrainians managed to recapture the town of Marinka, which has been a large battleground in the Donetsk front today in its entirety. That was reported by the Ministry of Defense about 9 hours ago, which is huge news, and hopefully they can maintain that kind of momentum and begin counterattacks to start to go almost directly into the suburbs of Donetsk itself. And so with that, we've actually covered all the Kharkiv and Donbass news, and so before we move on to Mariupol, which has had a load of news today and yesterday, we're going to take 3 to 5 more questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so up next we have a $20 donation from William Allen, who says, did you see 22-second video of the Ukrainian soldier laying down eating chocolate while artillery is hitting around him?
Yes, we did. And I actually just showed that a little while ago earlier on stream. So if you want to, you can rewind to the location unknowns, and you can see that video here on stream in my commentary about it. But I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a way. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And we have another question from William Allen, who puts in another $20 donation. And he says it's white phosphorus. Only the Russians would use smoke to give the other side cover. What a maroon. So says the Waskerly Wabbit.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And a lot of people in the comments, in the live chat, actually got into the polls, and 70% of them said it was smoke, and then 30% of them said it was white phosphorus. But then I tried to look at the chat a little bit more, and I saw a lot of people saying that white phosphorus is used to smoke. So let's pull that up. Is white phosphorus is white phosphorus a smoke shell? And let's get an answer to that. Let's see. Interesting. So apparently, white phosphorus is used as a smoke shell. So that may have been used as a smoke shell in itself. So, you know, it is a smoke shell, but it may have been white phosphorus. Or I think I saw someone else say, some other kind of chemical may be making the smoke in that video, but nonetheless, I did see a decent amount of people saying that white phosphorus is the smoke shell. So I thank you so much for the support, and also saying that, because it is something interesting, and hopefully there can be a pretty good chat about that in the comments. So with that being said, thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Cam Kilo, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Men gotta eat. With the finals, daily streams, and the mysterious nuclear video, probably not much time to cook. Please, don't work hungry, stay hydrated, and get yourself a pizza or that borscht you wanted to try. Slava Ukraine."
Slava Ukraini, and thank you so much. We do have a lot going on right now. Finals are here, and finals are a nightmare. Honestly, I'm so tired that it's really hard to even think about doing finals, although I am in the process of doing them. I have one tomorrow as well, which is a nightmare, but I thank you so much for the support, and I will make sure to eat incredibly well. May go get some Culvers. I don't know. I'm a huge fan of Culvers. Anyways, that being said, thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to answer one more question from the chat, and then we're going to move on to the Mariupol and Southern Front news as a whole.
And real quick, I want to recognize an $18 donation from Benny69. Thank you very much for your donation, and we very much appreciate it. Up next, we have a $15 donation from Praise Adonai, who is a longtime channel supporter, who says, "Enforcer, Zelensky says, send more weapons quickly. U.S. is lagging apparently on purpose. Some say the U.S. cannot afford to let Ukraine win. What say you? And will Russia be prosecuted for their atrocities?"
I don't really know about the news of the arms being deliberately slowed, because from what I've been able to tell, the U.S. arms shipments are arriving incredibly quickly and in large numbers. I did see someone today in my Discord sent me a video saying that a lot of the supplies are being held up in Lviv, but once they enter Ukraine, they're Ukraine's problem. And so if the American supplies aren't reaching the front, that's not an American issue. That's a Ukrainian logistical issue. But I don't even know if that is true or not. I think that may just be some kind of sensational news piece or something like that that may not have much credibility behind it. But to answer the other part of that question, I do think it's in America's interest to have Ukraine win. It would not be in America's interest for Ukraine to lose. If Ukraine lost and was annexed by the Russians or became a puppet state, that means that the NATO front line would be in Poland, where we have this blue line right here, and it would extend from here near Shatsk all the way down to Uzhhorod, kind of around there. Well, actually, it would extend all the way down to Hungary and Romania as well, because those are NATO. They're NATO countries as well. So, as far as that, it wouldn't be in America's interest for them to lose. It'd be much more in our interest for them to win, because it would extend our front line heavily with the Russians, and it will also get us much closer to strategic targets inside of Russia, like Volgograd, which controls the entire Volga River pretty much, which is just some 100-something miles from the Ukrainian border, and it would also put us in a closer distance to reach Moscow in some kind of conventional land war. While everyone does say, oh, nuclear weapons, blah, 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 conventional wars are useless, the world powers still work under the premise of, if a conventional war happens, what is our strategic situation. And so that's why the Russians have gone into an invasion and a war with Ukraine, is because they're trying to make sure that the NATO front line doesn't extend to become twice as long as it currently is. So thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question in a way. And so with that, we've reached the end of this question segment, and we're now going to move on to the Mariupol news. And we've gotten a load of Mariupol news today, almost directly, entirely out of the Azovstal. So starting off, because there's really no particular order that any of these go in today, there's not really a story being told, rather than the story of the brave men and the hell that they're facing right now in this small area that they still control the city, as they try and still buy time as much as possible for the rest of the Ukrainian military in the south. So starting off with the first video, we can see a rocket launcher being fired near the Azovstal by pro-Russian forces. So here's the video of that. So we can see here that they're moving through the building.
Как ты говоришь тебе, братан?
Это самая лучшая работа.
Я так понимаю, ты на этом не собираешься останавливаться?
Мне еще надо подарков накидать. Да я ж сразу бил бы, чтобы не въебали, блядь.
And so with that, that's the end of that video. So we're just going to move on. It's pretty much self-explanatory. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see that the TikTok stars have gotten too close to the combat and the danger themselves, and now videos are finally surfacing of them getting wounded. I've seen 2 of these today. We've never seen this before. Well, actually, we saw this once before, but it was some kind of superficial wound on an ankle, which was days ago. Today, we actually saw that it seems one guy got shot in the back pretty bad in this video. It wasn't graphic, so I can actually show it. But nonetheless, here's the video. We can actually see that the TikTok superstars can't get anywhere around the city now and act like it's a war zone and stuff, because now they have to make it look like they're getting close to the Azovstal. So now they're actually having to get in the danger in their videos, and we can see that this isn't playing well for them, because now they're kind of like firefighting ineptitudes are starting to pretty much be shown obviously. So here's the video. All right, so we're going to go back and kind of break this thing down. So you see all of the TikTok superstars sitting around because they really don't know what to do in an actual firefight, because it's not pre-planned and staged in a way. And so they're sitting there just standing around, but right around this corner in the open is an intersection. And this guy here, who must be some other level of stupid, has decided to run out from behind cover pretty much to go grab what appeared to be an AK and try and run back. He's trying to play like the toughest form of dodgeball that you play in an American high school, but he's about to find out that this isn't dodgeball, this is a war. So anyways, here's the video. You see him run for the AK, he tries to pick it up, and he starts running back, and he got shot in the back right there, and so he falls down to the ground. I don't know if he had a plate carrier on his back, because he's still kicking around his legs, which tells us that he wasn't, like, the bullet didn't actually paralyze him, but apparently it did hit him, and it's injured him pretty bad, because he's fallen to the ground and now he's looking like he's in pretty bad pain. And so that's the end of that video. That's the first time, I've got to say this again, that's the first time we've ever seen a Chechen appear to get wounded on camera seriously, and I think that's because they are actually having to get near the danger now to make it look like they're actually there and doing something in the city. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see that the Azov is still hitting the Russians back. They haven't given up yet, and it does appear that they are still trying to actually reach out of the Azovstal here and there and conduct assaults on the Russians directly. And so here in this video, we can see a civilian convoy of vehicles that have been commandeered by the Russians and marked with Z's, moving down a sidewalk on the road. It appears that the road has taken a major amount of damage, and they were doing that detour for that reason. We can now see the Azov. By the way, I know that this isn't disclosing anything that the Azov is scared of, because this was uploaded by Azov.org, which is their website. And so the Azov is moving up towards the civilian convoy. Of course, this drone is theirs, so apparently they got the footage from it and knew exactly where the convoy was. And you're about to see them run around that corner and light this thing up like it's the 1930s and they're in the mafia. So now you can see that they've caused massive damage to the convoy. Every single one of the vehicles has taken a sizable amount of damage. It looks like a lot of shots to the engine blocks on most of them, which has probably made them inoperable. We now see the drone panning around to the rest of the buildings in the area, and we can now see the Azov moving forward. And it looks like, as far as in this footage, they were actually pretty well put together. We can see that he threw what seems to be a grenade. Yeah, he threw a grenade at the van. Also looks like right there, I didn't see that. There's apparently Russians right on the side of that van. Right there, you can see them moving around. Looks like some of them might be wounded. We can now see that he's getting right back up to the brick wall again, and he's actually got a ladder this time. And then he just lobs a grenade right over. And that one was right on those Russians. So we can actually see that a few of them are still behind the van. It looks like they're not wounded to the point of no return. But now it looks like they too has succumbed to some kind of injuries, and now they're just lying there. So you can see there that was a pretty decent amount of Russian troops that had been wiped out. But nonetheless, they are on the back foot in Mariupol. While that is a case of Russians losing there in general, this is the only place in the entire war that the Russians are actually winning overall in. We've seen them push through the city week by week, very slowly. It hasn't been fast. I mean, like, you know, it's not like it's a crushing victory or they're like it's a blitzkrieg or anything. It's been dreadfully slow, and they've been taking huge amounts of casualties as far as we've known. But still, we see that they're taking a decent amount of losses, but the Azov is in a very tough situation, along with the 36th Infantry Brigade, which is also stuck in the Azovstal with them. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next video, where we can see a pro-Russian BTR-82 being used inside of Mariupol. We've seen a lot of these videos, but once again, it is interesting to see.
Ovo je čudovno. Hajla. Čuva.往后走站一点。
You can actually hear the fear in these guys' voices as they're running around. Like, you can tell that they really don't know what they're doing. And of course, everyone's always scared in combat, but these guys sound that level of scared where they really don't know what's going on anymore or what to do. You know, on like a normal emotional level, and they're almost on the point of breaking down and running away. But it appears that that's why the BTR has moved up, is probably to try and give these troops a little bit of support so they don't entirely dematerialize on the front. So now you can hear the BTR apparently ripping into the units that are in front of them. And at this point, I'm going to start assuming that the Russian videos are actually being taken incredibly close, if not in the middle of a firefight, actually. Because from the videos I've seen today, 2 of them actually showing the Chechens getting wounded. I'm assuming now that it's so hard for them to actually mock up something that looks like they're near the Azovstal, that they pretty much decided that the videos have to be made around the Azovstal, which is putting the filming TikTok actor superstar people like we saw in a pretty decent amount of danger.
Полный, ой, что ты? What? Deli olan bu.
Now you see that the BTR is just taking a good swath at all the buildings. And so with that, that's the end of that video. Of course, they sounded pretty freaked out at the start of it, but once the BTR started to give them support, it sounded like they tried to collect themselves a decent bit. But with that, that's the end of that video. We're now going to move on to the next one, where we can see another wounded Chechen. This is the second video I was talking about here, and you can see in this video that one of them does get wounded. It appears that it looks like, and don't take this politically. Well, no, I'm not going to say that. It looks like he got shot in the arm. I was going to make a joke, but I'm not. But anyways, he was firing an RPG. They're going to take fire right there. And it looks like he got hit in the arm. He threw the RPG down, and then you'll see him will run out of the way of the opening where he was standing at, and he's going to cradle his arm, and I'm guessing that he must have been shot there. As you can see, he's holding his arm like it's been shot. Now he's cradling it and running off. And that tells me that he actually was wounded. They're not going to stage, because every time they've staged something, they always make it look like the Russians take no casualties. They're well put together, and everything's great. But now we're seeing that the Chechens and the Russians in general on video are actually getting wounded a pretty good bit. And that's telling me that out of all the footage that they've been trying to get and show to the public, this is the best they could find and the best they could send out, probably. So that's giving you a pretty good idea of how things are going for them in Mariupol at the moment. And they're probably getting bogged down, maybe, considering based off of the video evidence we're seeing and the fact that they're showing wounded soldiers now. That may be showing that they're actually taking a hellfire from the defenders inside of the Azovstal, and that the Azovstal may hold for some time from now. But anyways, we're now going to move on to the next video, where we can see the Azov has never stopped kicking. They once again are taking out Russian tanks still, while they're trying to fight from inside of the Azovstal itself. So here's that video. You see him run out. You can see right down there, it looks like a BTR-82 or a BTR-60. He fires the Enel at it and gets a direct hit, which knocked that BTR out. BTRs have paper-thin armor, so any kind of direct hit with an anti-tank weapon will destroy them completely. So that's the end of that video. We can still see that the Azov is giving them hell. And paired with the videos of the Russian soldiers getting wounded today, which were the few videos I could actually find of the Russians in that area today, it's giving me the picture that over the past 48 hours or so, the Russians have not made any progress, and they're having an incredibly hard time now, and maybe have even stalled in their attacks against the Azovstal. That may also be supported because they're still calling in very heavy artillery on the Azovstal. As we can see in this video, they are dropping massive bombs on the Azovstal. Right here, just for scale, these little blurry blocks right here are entire apartment blocks. So that gives you a scale of how large this single bomb was. And so with that, that's the end of that video. But you could see that explosion was massive. I'm not exactly sure what kind of explosive was used, but it looks even larger than a ballistic missile like an Iskander or a Caliber. So we'll just try and keep out an ear to see if the Russians ever say what kind of explosive that was. But with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news we've gotten, which is more evidence of shelling in the Azovstal. So I'm going to let y'all see that real quick, kind of self-explanatory, but it is showing what they're facing there. So you can hear the rounds flying in and hitting the Azovstal right out there in the distance. And so with that, that's the end of that video. But you could get the idea that from both of those videos, the massive bomb that was hit was dropped on the Azovstal, along with this video of the shelling in the Azovstal, it's giving you the picture that the Russians are throwing everything they've got in that small area to try and finally dislodge this last group of defenders inside of this metallurgical plant and finally take the entire city. So with that, we've got 2 more bits of news left in the Azovstal, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the news near Kherson, and then finally in Lviv, which will round out all the news for tonight. Rounding out the news in Mariupol, better said than saying starting off, we can see an attack on Ukrainian positions inside of Mariupol. This is once again showing y'all that the Russians are trying to give them everything they've got, and so here's this video. We can see that bombs are raining down on the Ukrainians in this specific area. And I've just got to say, I mean, like, this is something to think that the defenders are still withholding, well, not withholding, holding under all this pressure, and that they're not giving up. They've been there for 48 hours in the Azovstal alone, the last place that they hold inside of the city, undergoing this kind of hell for days on end now, and they're still holding. It's impressive to think that those are just normal people who joined the military, and now they're doing something that is historical in a way. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the last bit of news inside of the Azovstal, where we can see some drone footage of the Azovstal metallurgical plant. So I'm just going to let y'all see this video. It's pretty much self-explanatory. You know, it's the Azovstal, so I'm just going to let y'all see it. So that's the end of the video. Not much to comment there. Really just trying to take in the video myself and imagine someone actually being in there for days on end. I don't even know how people survive in that kind of situation. Yet the soldiers continue to pretty much push on with their job in every single way that they're expected to, and even go above and beyond every single day. And the sad thing about it at this point is that who knows if anyone will ever actually hear the final stories of the defenders of Mariupol, their last stands and such that occur in the Azovstal. Sometimes things like that are lost to history because the Russian side may never account what the Azovstal did in there. They may lie about it. And so it's just a wonder that they're in there, and they may know that their story in the actual last hours of their stand, whenever that will never be heard by hardly anyone around the world if there are not any survivors that come out of it. And so I gotta say that those are one hell of a group of people that are defending Mariupol and have held for 50 days. I've just got to say, I've got nothing but admiration and respect for those kind of fighting people, because it takes a lot inside of a person to accept their fate and continue to go on and persevere with what is happening to them. And so with that, that is the end of the news in Mariupol. That's all we've got. And so we're now going to move on to the Kherson area, actually the Mykolaiv area, where we've seen that the Russians are once again bombarding the city with artillery barrages or some kind of MLRS attack. So without further ado, I'm just going to let y'all see that video. It pretty much speaks for itself. You can see the flashes of the RD attack. I think it's really an MLRS attack out in the distance. Leaf just asked, do I go to the bathroom? Yes, but it's before and after the stream. I don't ever go in the middle of it if I can, not do that. So, just to answer that random question. But that's the end of the news in the southern front, actually. Once again, pretty run-of-the-mill stuff. We see the Russians bombarding Mykolaiv once more. I'm not sure why, because we know that the Russians aren't actually even close to Mykolaiv anymore. The closest they are, according to my map, is 20-something miles away, yet they still bombard the city almost nightly. So with that, we're going to move on to the last the last three bits of news that we've gotten from Lviv, which all occurred yesterday on day 54. First, we could see Caliber cruise missiles on their way to Lviv in this video. I'm going to rewind it so that way y'all can see the missile. It's right up here in the top left corner of the screen. And once again, they're on their way to Lviv. And we got actual videos just a little while later of them hitting their targets inside the city. So I'm just going to let y'all see these. It pretty much just shows from two perspectives in this video exactly what happened to the city. As you can see, explosions are rocking the city all over the place. You can actually see the next cruise missile come in and explode right there. And so now you can see that they're just reeling, in the videos, just watching the damage that's occurred. And it's something, because this city isn't destroyed to the point that most other frontline cities are. In fact, it's not a frontline city. It's as far away from the front line as possible. And you can still see that it's a very modern Ukrainian town. I mean, like, it's pretty on up there. I mean, like, this is more modern than the downtown I live near. So it's crazy to me that a modern city like this can come under missile attacks like that, and pretty much on civilian targets. We know later on that these were all on civilian targets nearly.
Це з Білорусі, якщо виходить це вверх, з Білорусі.
Now we can see a third caliber coming in and hitting the same target twice. So with that, that's the end of that video. And we'll actually go to the last one I've got, which is another perspective of the calibers killing, pretty much civilians in the city. It's a terrible thing to see, and I hate that the news ends like this tonight, but it is the last thing that I cover. So I'm going to rewind this one. You can see it going straight into its target right here. It's crazy to me that that modern day people in a country like Ukraine can be under pretty much a blitz kind of attack with just bombs flying, just flying bombs just coming into their city and exploding all throughout, killing people randomly wherever they are. It's sick. It's terrorism at this point, and I think that the world really ought to step up and stop this right in its tracks if they can, or if not, maybe even escalate it to the point where, either it won't be allowed or nothing will be allowed from then on. If you get where I'm going with that. But anyways, that's the end of the news and that video. So I hope y'all enjoyed the stream tonight. Make sure if you are new, if you did enjoy the stream, to subscribe. We do these streams every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They actually start at 10:10, but the actual stream itself starts at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So make sure to subscribe. If you are a member of the Lee Spring Army, make sure to like. Likes help out the video an incredibly good amount and helps us to reach out to more people and let them also hear the news of what happened today. And so once again, I thank you all so much for watching, and we're now going to move to the questions for the night. And so with that, what do we got as our first question?
So for our first question here, we have a $50 donation from a very long time channel supporter, Trademarks and Patents for Growing Businesses. Thank you very much for your continued support of the channel and being a longtime viewer. His comment is, great job, guys. Keep up the good work and the good grades.
Well, I thank you very much. I have a lot of people wishing me well with the finals, and it is a huge deal to make sure to do good in finals. I have kept up all A's and B's. I think I only have one B this semester, which is amazing because I've pretty much been doing this about half of it, and it's been eating up a lot of time, like 50 or to 60 hours a week, depending on how much I do. So it's really crazy to me that I've been able to keep up good grades so far. So I thank you for the blessings in a way. And so hopefully I will do good. And I thank you very much once again for supporting the channel. You've been here for a very long time, and you, of course, do know that it helps out our channel a lot. So thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $18 donation from No Trick, who says, thanks for keeping us reliably informed. Do you have any knowledge of the so-called filtration camps the Russians have used to hold refugees from Ukraine?
I do not have any news on those, and I think that may actually be the first time I've heard of them. I don't really get a lot of news out of Russia about what's happening to any of the Ukrainian prisoners, refugees, or really anyone of a Ukrainian background. I don't really have a lot of news of what's happening to them, and the best I've been able to get is rumors. So I hate to say that. So I'm gonna have to kind of like plead ignorance on that question because I just really don't know enough to answer it because there's not been enough confirmed news about that I've been able to get. But I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question at least in a way. So I thank you so much, and with that being said, we're gonna move on to the next question.
And real quick, I just want to apologize to Danford Sawyer. I accidentally hid you, and that was by accident. I was trying to get a bot. So I'm going to get you unhidden here in just a moment. Sorry about that. Next up, we have a $10 donation from longtime channel supporter Frostbright Productions, who says, love supporting this channel. You guys and your team do so much work. I want to take this time to send a shout out to all of your Discord and Forcer team members who work in the background. Much love.
I know, thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do recognize the Discord team. They do an incredibly decent amount of work, and I would like to thank, first off, Crazy and Brad, because out of everyone, I know that they've been doing a decent amount of work. There are, of course, others. There's Caffeine, Matthew Flynn, and a couple of other guys on the Discord who make sure the thing keeps ticking, and I thank them so much because with the amount of time I spend on everything, it's almost impossible for me to ever get around to the Discord, and so it's very rare for me to get on. One time I got on and I saw something weird in the general chat, and I was like, what is this? But that's like the last time I remember actually getting on the Discord and really trying to look through it, because I just have like no time at all. But I thank them so much for the help that they do running that Discord, and I do thank you very much for the support. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up here, we have a $10 donation from Wolfgang Zavago, who says, initially rejected by the U.S., Russians are secretly hustled over the Tijuana border via Vice News. In my opinion, no Russian should be allowed to enter the U.S. They must pay the consequences of war.
That is true. I can agree with that. But there's always a little bit of a political context here. And I would like to revisit history because while I agree with you, there is something that does have to be pointed out. Whenever we went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and whenever the terror attacks of 9/11 occurred, or actually the basement bombing in the Twin Towers that happened a little while before, there was a lot of calls back then to ban immigration or even travel from Middle Eastern countries that were known to have terrorist cells operating within them. And that was considered racist by some and a necessary security precaution by others, depending on what side of the spectrum you were on. And I think while everyone is pissed off with the Russians right now, that is really kind of in the same category as what we were doing to the Middle Eastern countries at certain times during recent history. But nonetheless, I don't really weigh in politically. So regardless, whatever side you're on, I do think it's important to look at it in that context, because one side who was totally against doing that to the Middle Eastern countries is now almost all the way on board with doing that to Russia, which I kind of find weird that it's a kind of like a hypocritic flip-flop on both sides of what the old stance used to be. And now both sides have flipped and they're doing the same stance against the Russians. So that's kind of weird to me, but I thank you so much for the support. And I do agree that I think that Russians should be barred from entering the United States, primarily because we don't know if they're actually Russian operatives entering the country or not. But I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And I quickly want to recognize a $10 donation from longtime channel supporter Junebug72. Thank you very much for your continued support of the channel. Up next, we have a $10 donation from James Lynn, who says, more U.S. equipment on the way, 300 M113A3s and 18 M777 howitzers. The howitzers are key because now we can send them our 155 millimeter ammo, including PGM munitions, training done by the U.S. troops.
I can't agree. The M777 is an incredibly capable artillery piece, and we do know that the M777 does have access to incredibly good munitions, like the Excalibur round, which is a smart kind of ammunition in a way. And I do think that that kind of support is incredibly helpful in ensuring that Ukraine can keep the upper hand in its defensive war against the Russians. So I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you did share that info with us, because it's kind of hard for me to cover that, because today we actually had 38 pieces of individual news, which is the cap for the amount of news I can cover in the single stream, because once I go beyond that number, the amount of time that the stream takes to cover goes on way too long, and so I have to kind of actually limit the amount of news I can put on. But I thank you so much for sharing that info with us, and I do think that that support is very beneficial to the Ukrainian cause. So I thank you once again for the support, and with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, purchased cup because it has World War I theme, and I take picture of my running World War I tank replica with the Ukraine flag. What made you choose a World War I avatar? Dying for chocolate right now.
Well, the chocolate was pretty good, and I thank you very much for the support. And to answer the question, I'm actually a reenactor, and so I actually do a decent amount of well, not really a decent amount. I've hardly been reenacting in a while, and I hate that because I love to do it. But I actually do World War I reenacting, and I think that the World War I British gas mask model is one of the coolest looking gas masks there ever was. And I think that all the pictures of the World War I soldiers that were wearing gas masks, you know, if you've ever seen those pictures, they just looked really cool. And so my initial avatar, if you've been around for a very long time, was actually apparently the Fallout 76 Ranger. I've never played that game, so I don't really know. But anyways, that was supposed to be the avatar I've got right now. But once I got up to 15,000 subscribers, I was like, that thing's got to change, or else that little NCR avatar is going to be permanent. I don't want that. So I went and put on my reenacting like kit, put on the gas mask, and I took some pictures in it. And so that's how I got that World War I avatar. So that's a kind of a cool story. That's literally me in that picture. You can't see my face, but I'm actually under that gas mask. So whenever you buy merch, you're literally buying a picture of me that's been color corrected to look kind of cool, and you know, put on a cool logo. So that's kind of a neat little story. I hope that kind of fills in why it's a World War I avatar. And I'm also a huge fan of World War I military history. I think it's one of the more forgotten categories of history, although it's not the most forgotten. I think, honestly, everything that happened in the Renaissance era in terms of warfare, and also in the pike and shot era of the 1600s, are the most forgotten wars in European history, at least. So I thank you very much for the support. Hope that does answer the question in a way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Joe, who says, it won't be allowed or nothing will be allowed. I second that. Great job as always, y'all.
And I thank you very much for the support. And to clarify what I meant by that, I mean that either this should not be allowed and it should be stopped, or if we cannot stop it with words or ultimatums, then we just need to go into a conventional war and get this thing over with. Because the fact that this is actually happening to a group of innocent people inside of a country that never did anything to the Russians to warrant this, I think is terrible. And, you know, there's a lot of people today, and these are the kind of people, the reason why World War II happened, and then everyone, and, you know, and these are the same people, in my opinion, and I know that this is probably true, that sat there and go, oh my God, I cannot believe that World War II happened. Why didn't everyone just see the signs and step up and stop it? And then at the same time, they'll go in the modern day watching this occur a second time, literally the exact same way, and they'll go, oh, we don't need to step in. How dare you say we step in and send over American boys to die in this war and all that stuff. I'm not a warmonger or a a saber rattler, but this is still something that you obviously can see. And I think that at this point, regardless whether it meant world annihilation or not, aren't morals more important than surviving? You know, isn't that kind of like what the United States has been built on? We were more willing in the Revolutionary War to go it alone and let our national economy collapse in the name of freedom and our morals and our beliefs in that. And so I think that we should still have that kind of defining principle today, and even if it does seem reckless, stand up for freedom and democracy around the entire world. So I thank y'all very much for the support. I hope y'all understand my position on that. If you don't, I'm sorry, but that's kind of my opinion on this. And I'm just going to have to let that be what it is. But anyways, thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the comment in a way. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
So up next is a $10 donation from Not a Teacher, who says, I don't know if this was a location unknown. My dad said his brother told him that the guy who was run over by the tank was sent to a hospital in his hometown in the Rivne Oblast, saying the city may be too much information.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I don't know how you would send a flattened Russian to a hospital. I mean, there's no way that that guy survived being run over by the tank. Just saying that. I mean, it looks like the entire track rolled right over that guy. And T-72B3 is around 50 tons, I believe. And so you had probably 25 tons on that one track alone that rolled right over that guy. And so I'm not really sure if he was entirely flattened, but I do thank you for the support and the comment, because if he did somehow survive, maybe the tracks just ran over his legs or something, but if he did somehow survive and he was sent to a hospital, that is interesting in a way. But I thank you very much for the support and sharing that information with us if that is in fact the case. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next is a $10 donation from Rockets Red Wines, who says, your analysis has been spot on. Coverage of the Makva and Azov has been big in the news after your reporting, and that's great work. By the way, I controlled nuke ICBMs in my old life, and I'm looking forward to your new video.
And I thank you very much for the support. Well, I can't say that because that's a spoiler, but I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do have a bit of a nuclear background, and I hope that you will find the video very interesting. The whole reason why it hasn't been made yet is because we went up to the place that we were filming, which is Huntsville, which really could really go that direction, you know, of an ICBM operator. But we went up there and we started to make a video on what we were going to talk about. And when we were making it, we were doing the research as we went. It was a very ad hoc kind of video production, and now we've kind of realized that that wasn't a good way to do it as well, and that's also a reason why we're refilming it. But as we were doing the research on what we were looking into, we found out that while everywhere else is a different story, this one location we were at is terrible. And I can't really say it in other wordage because it's going to give away a lot. But we've decided to change the entire video pretty much to talk about this one place because no one has ever talked about it before. And I think that a lot of people need to know about the location that we went to. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers the question in a way about what the video may be about. But I don't want to give away too much because I do want it to be very interesting and not rehashed like 6 times on stream where everyone kind of knows what I'm going to say on it. So thank you once again for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy the stream. And so with that being said, on to the next question.
And the next one is a $10 donation from Captain Crows 1220, who says, I don't see why it would be a smoke shell if soldiers weren't advancing on the ground. Strategically, it doesn't make much sense to me here.
Could you restate that one again real quick for me?
He said, I don't see why it would be a smoke shell if soldiers weren't advancing on the ground. Strategically, it doesn't make much sense to me.
That's what I was thinking as well. And a lot of people were saying they used, you know, like you're probably saying in this tone, oh, you idiot, they're using it to mark the Russian positions. But why are they marking the Russian positions with a smoke shell when they're already bombarding it with artillery? That didn't really make any sense to me, because obviously the artillery is being guided in by the drones, so why use a smoke shell to mark where that is? And on top of that, artillery is fired from such a distance that using a visible marker like a smoke shell would be practically useless. So, you know, that's kind of my input. I was going to go into that earlier, but I was like, no point. But I thank you very much for the support and mentioning that, because that was kind of the reason why I was saying it's probably white phosphorus. And then we found out that white phosphorus is actually what they use for smoke shells most of the time. So it pretty much confirms to me that it probably was white phosphorus. But I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from John. Thank you very much for your donation to the channel. We appreciate it. The next comment up we have is from Zyper Sniper 1, who puts in a $10 donation and says, in the video with the artillery, God be like, not today, my boy.
Well, I thank you very much
sure
for the
what that means.
support. I don't know what video that's talking about. I don't think Matthew knows either, but if I did know what video it was talking about, I would comment on it, but unfortunately I'm not sure which one it was. But I thank you so much for the support. And also, I would like to address some things in the comments. I've seen one person, I'll just answer this one since it's the most recent one. Dozer242 says, in all caps, the tank has smoke countermeasures. They are smoke. You could clear... Okay, we're going to go back to the video because I don't know if you were watching it or not, but that obviously didn't come from the tank. It came from the artillery. Okay, so we're going to go back. We're going to watch it. We're going to skip forward until we get to that point. So let me go through here and find it. Let me see. Maybe it was somewhere through here. No, I think this may actually be the wrong one. Let me go to another one. UA destroys Russian tank. That's not it, is it? No, it's not. Maybe it was over here. Yeah, I think it was this one, actually. Let's go check this. Yeah, I think it was this one. We're going to go through this real quick. Let me skip forward. I'm going to get to it. Let's see here. Hang on, everyone. I'm telling you, I got to get to the bottom of this. That's just normal artillery. It's not the round in question. So we got to skip forward a little bit more. That wasn't it. That wasn't it. Okay, was that it? Nope, that wasn't it. Oh man, I think this is the video. I just can't find the actual round exploding. Let's go to another one. Hang on, everyone. We're going to go to another one. Russian tank, Ukrainian SPG, Russian reloading Iskander. Let me just go through all of them. Chocolate is the bomb. Russian night raid. Ukrainian. Man. Can't find it. Anyways. Yeah, smoke is launched from tanks, sure. But the explosion of the smoke shell, if we want to call it that, was like 400 feet in the air. So I know that the tank's grenade dischargers don't shoot a smoke grenade vertically 400 feet in the air directly above it. That doesn't make any sense. So you can go back and watch the video. Unfortunately, I'm not going to look too long because I don't want to eat up everyone's time. These streams go on incredibly long as they are. But with that, hope I have addressed that. And so we're now going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from B. Ledbetter, who says, "Great job as always, guys."
And I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy the videos. Every once in a while, there is a little bit of a contention, though, you know, like on the little smoke thing. But I'm glad that overall you do enjoy the streams. So with that being said, thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a $10 donation from Sweaty Chungus, who says, "The TikTok brigade can't even get shot and look real. Thought I was watching 1940s Western. I've had leg cramps more convincing."
Well, I mean, like, you know, I don't know why they'd be faking that because it doesn't make them look good. It makes them look pretty bad. Also, I can't say that they're too fake because the joke I was going to make was actually about Kyle Rittenhouse a while ago. And, you know, like when the guy was cradling his arm. And him and the guy who got shot by Rittenhouse, and we know he got shot because when you watch that video, you see his, like, arm muscles on his upper forearm just, you know, turn into red meat. You could see that he cradled his arm the same way. So I don't really think they're fake. I think they're actually real, and that wouldn't really benefit the Russians at all to fake something like that. It makes them look bad. So I thank you very much for the support, but I think we'll just have to agree to disagree on that one. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
Okay, and next up we have a $10 donation from Randy Adams 03, who says, "I saw a report today that U.S. government is going to reopen as many as 18 World War I ammo factories. Have you seen those?"
I have not. And that's something really interesting to me. 18 World War One ammo fact. I mean, like those things would be like, yikes, 100. Let me think. 105 years old maybe for America. You know, considering that we went into the war in 1917 and then they were probably mobilized then. But if they are, that's pretty interesting. I haven't heard that, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to plead ignorance on it. But I do thank you very much for sharing that with us. And if that is true, that is pretty bizarre and very cool. So I thank you very much for the info. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question. Hello? Hello? 1 second, everyone. I think we may have just lost Matthew. Give me just a second, y'all. We're going to try and see if we can get him back. Okay, so apparently Matthew has gone down. So we got a Black Hawk down here. That's kind of a little bit unfortunate. Wait a minute, apparently. Let's see. So let me check with y'all. Y'all can hear me, right? I mean, I'm just making sure that it's both. It's not both of us. Because I can see the chat moving 1,000 miles an hour right now. Okay, so apparently Matthew is in the middle of fixing the issue. Apparently he's the only one affected by it as far as we can know. So I'll try and answer him since I can see the chat. So we just got one in from Dino Rez for $5. Thank you very much for the support. And he says, "Enforcer, you can see the discharges of the smoke rounds on the tank and the Russian tanks getting brewed like tea video." Oh, okay, so that is the name of the thing. So let's go back. Let's find it. Let's see. Where is the getting brewed like tea? Oh, wait a minute. That's the one right outside of Kharkiv. So with that, we're going to take a look at that video real quick. So let's take a look at that and see that round exploding since we now know which video it is. So let me skip forward. I'm going to skip on through until we get to that round in particular, which is right there. Okay, so let me take a look at this real quick. All right. Yeah. Okay, honestly, I can't agree. It does look like it just fired the smoke grenades out of its canisters because you can actually see the smoke appearing right there. So, yeah, I can't agree with that. So we're going to get to the next question from Matthew. So I hope that does address that, and we're now going to move on to the next one. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the next question up is from Randy Adams 03, who puts in a $10 donation and says, I saw a report today that U.S. government is going to reopen as many as 18 World War I ammo factories. Have you seen this?
I think we already covered that one. Here, I'm just gonna. Matthew's had to move rooms, so he's had to come over to mine, and he's having a mental breakdown because he's busting out laughing right now. So I'm just going to take the spreadsheet and look at this real quick and just read through them. So we got a $10 donation from Zyper Sniper 1 that says, if Russian advance fails, will Russia start using nukes or bioweapons? That's a fairly good question. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly what the Russians will do, and saying anything like that would be speaking on the behalf of a lunatic, and I can't really get in the mindset of one all too well. But my answer to that would be probably not, because the United States has made it clear that any kind of use of biological, nuclear, or chemical weapons will lead to our direct involvement in the war. So that pretty much means we will join it. So I don't think they will do that. I don't think they're that stupid. But then again, we are speaking for a lunatic, so it's not entirely certain which direction they would go. So we're now, so I thank you very much for the support. Sorry if I'm kind of like shooting through them a little bit, because now we've had a little bit of a breakdown and a disconnection on Matthew's end. So we're now going to move to the next question from G Hill for $4.99, saying, is there a way that they can send some help and weapons to the stalled Azov and Mariupol? I feel so sad for them. Well, I can agree that it's pretty sad, but I think that there's really no way to send them any support. The area that they're in is incredibly small. Trying to fly over any support and drop it in by parachute would be incredibly difficult. Using drones to do that might be a pretty big stretch. So I don't think that there would actually be a way to do that effectively. And I've covered that a lot before in earlier streams. So I'm going to try and answer that one in brief, but I do hope that that's answered the question, and I thank you so much for the support. So we're now going to move on to the next one from the British perspective, which is, he said, Enforcer Matt, this is really freaky. World War I, 728, 1914 equals 68. World War II equals 68. Invasion of Ukraine equals 68. Well, that's pretty interesting. I didn't actually know that that was the case, but that is a kind of like a weird number phenomenon, kind of odd in a way. But I thank you so much for the support. I don't really know how to comment on that, though, because that's kind of like the similarities in between John Wilkes, well, no, Abraham Lincoln and JFK. You know, if you've ever heard that list, how Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater and Kennedy was shot in a Ford or something like that. But anyways, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address that comment in a way. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next one, which is a $20 donation from Suze, who says, enjoying your show before Bob and Weave. LOL, I think you have a real job. Thank you. I don't know what that means, unfortunately, but I do thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy the channel. So thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question. Well, actually, this is just a bit of support from Kaltenberg, who sent it a $20 donation. And I thank you so much for the support. It does mean a lot to the channel, and it does help us to continue to make these shows a reality. So I thank you so much once again. It does mean a lot. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question. Hopefully, unfortunately, I don't think Matthew's able to moderate anymore because we just had Hot Girls and Boys 18+ video chat pop in again. So hopefully we can try and keep a handle on that stuff. But we're now going to move on to the next question, which is from Simon Gardner. I'm sorry if I'm not getting to some of the questions that were put in before. I'm trying to keep up with the ones that are coming through now because there's really no way to keep track of them once they disappear. So Simon says, I found this site which may be interesting to your viewers, showing total Russian losses updated on a daily basis. Minus and the Kyiv Independent. I thank you very much for the support. I have actually checked with the Kyiv Independent a lot to make sure that the casualty reports can come through, but for some reason I haven't been able to see them in recent days. So I thank you once again for the support, and I do thank you for sharing that information with us. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next question, which is from Dozer242, which has been a return supporter of this channel, where he said, wasn't trying to be rude about the all caps tank countermeasures thing. Keep up the good work. Well, no hard feelings there. It's just that it's always weird to me to see all caps because it does kind of come off in a rude way, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like people are shouting at me, and I'm not, I'm not like weak or anything or like sensitive, But still, you know, it's like, yeah, you know, why do you have to say it like that? But anyways, no hard feelings. I understand completely. And now that I did rewatch the video, there is fact to the statement that it was the tank countermeasures. So I was wrong, and I do thank you very much for the support and everyone bringing that to my attention to go back and review that. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of support, which is 60 of an unknown currency sign. I don't even know what that is, but I do thank you very much for the support. It does mean a lot, and it does help us to continue to run this channel. Let's see. Tony Wilson, just to answer something from the comments, said the Enforcer is a strip club announcer on the side. Confirmed. You never know. Anyways, moving on to the next question from Zyper Sniper for another $10. He said Sabotage might hear about the history of the Azov and make a song to honor them. I'm not really a big music listening person. Surprisingly, probably a lot of y'all surprised. The best music I listen to is just like old military marching music, which is a really weird genre to listen to. And for some reason, that's like the first thing I ever heard in my life, and so I just stuck with it. I don't even know how it was the first thing I heard, but I remember hearing the song Farewell Slavyanka, and that was the first song I actually ever just sat down and heard outside of a movie. And I was like 8 years old when I heard it, and then from then on, I've just kind of stayed in the military music arena, which it's not like cadences and stuff. I don't like cadences. I know there's a lot of people who do, but I don't like military cadences. They just don't vibe with me. They seem kind of a little bit more commercialized than like the artistic marching music that used to be created for the militaries, like March of the Gladiators. So I'm just playing about that. But anyways, we're now going to move on to the next question, which was sent in by Simon Gardner, where he says, interesting to see that the Ukrainian farmers have planted their wheat crop. Your footage shows grads being fired in a planted wheat field. I can't agree. I thought that was really interesting too. We have seen that they've actually go through the process of sowing the fields, which it's very important because we do know that Ukraine is a breadbasket for Europe. And so with them lacking the ability to plant crops, if that was the case, the Western world could start facing food shortages in Europe, which would be dire and terrible. You know, pretty much for everyone else around the world. Number one for Africa, because who in the world is going to be sending them foodstuffs as part of some kind of humanitarian aid mission when there's not even enough food to feed people inside of Europe? So, you know, that's kind of something interesting to look at. So I thank you very much for the support and also bringing that up, because that is very important to note that the farmers have not only been stealing tanks, but they also went on with the sowing season as well. So thank you once again. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next question.
Enforcer, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so sorry about that, folks. Something just happened to my computer, and it completely froze up and shut down. And I literally was trying to crawl up to the Enforcer's mic when you heard me laughing just a moment ago. So that was definitely a sight to behold. But anyways, I am back. So which was the last question that we just left off on?
We just left off on Zyper Sniper. You know, the second $10 donation he sent in. And also, I'm going to answer a few things. First off, in the chat, someone said, John Romaine, I'm sorry if I'm getting your name wrong, but you say I vote for bagpipes. I actually play bagpipes, which is kind of weird. But moving on from that, we've gotten a $5 donation from Cesar E. Lopez, and I'm going to let you take over real quick in a second once we get done with the ones that just came through. And he says, what's the most common sidearm for foreign legionaries? I remember you said AK-12 and AK-74 were what was being handed out, though I don't know on sidearms. I don't think anyone gets a lot of sidearms. Pistols are something that's kind of a luxury for most units. In World War I and World War II, most like enlisted soldiers didn't get sidearms. Usually that's something that's relegated to officers. In World War I, it was the Colt 1917 revolver and also the Colt 1911, which was a bit more rare, but also an incredibly good semi-automatic handgun. I still think it kind of holds up in the modern world, although a lot of people have arguments about clip capacity and all that stuff, but I don't get into that. I think it's a cool gun. I like the 1911, honestly. I'm a bigger fan of it than the Glock, just because I can actually shoot it a little bit more accurately for some reason. But anyways, with that, we're now going to move on to the next question that came in, and then we're going to hand it back over to Matthew to ask the questions, which came in from Sweaty Chungus, who said, Chechens getting lit up was real, but they still made it look like a Michael Jackson thriller. Yeah, I can agree. But I thank you so much for the support. I can't agree that it did kind of look like a Michael Jackson Thriller thing in a way, but it was. I do think it was real. That's my honest opinion on it. But I thank you so much for the support and adding that in as well. And so with that, we're going to hand it back over to Matthew to pick up with the donation from Arlie John, and then we're actually going to be picking up from there. And so take it away, Matthew.
All right. So, as the enforcer said, we want to recognize a $10 donation from Arlie John. Thank you very much for your donation to the channel, and thank you all for your patience as well. So, next up, we have a $10 donation from Caesar E. Lopez III, who says, any word on the number of the remaining defenders of Mariupol? I hear that there are 2,500 troops and 800 foreign fighters, and an additional 2,000 TDF and a few 1,000 civilians still fighting.
I don't actually have confirmed numbers on the defenders in Mariupol, but as far as I knew, in total, there was only 2,000 defenders left. But then again, I don't have an actual number to back that up, so that may be wrong. Then again, they may not actually want the Russians to have an idea of their remaining numbers and forces, because that may give the Russians an upper hand in their battle planning in a way. But I thank you so much for the support. Unfortunately, I can't answer that question too well, because I don't actually know the numbers off the bat. But I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And unfortunately, since we did have a glitch there midstream, I'm probably not going to be able to recover every single super chat that has been missed. I'm going to go back and try to get as many as I can. But if I've missed it, I think the best thing to do would just be put it in the regular chat and say basically that I missed it. And I'll try to add it to the list. But I apologize in advance if I've missed anybody's. But next up here, we have a super chat from Rich Hogan, a longtime channel supporter. He puts in a $10 donation and says, great work as always, keep it up, and a shout out as well to all of those behind the scenes.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do support everyone behind the scenes. As far as the stream goes, every once in a while we have Crazy on, but every single night we have Matthew and the Watcher on, which do a huge amount of work making sure that the stream chat stays hospitable to away. But then again, that's still incredibly tough because Hot Boys and Girls always comes through and does the same stuff every single night, which I just don't like seeing at all. I don't like that. There's a time and a place for like stupid stuff, but this isn't really like the place, you know what I mean? But I thank you very much for the support. There it is again. It just popped up. All right, Matt just got rid of it. Thank you so much. But anyways, with that being said, we're now going to move on to the next question. I thank you so much once again, Rich Hogan, for being a return supporter.
And I want to recognize an $8 donation from John Zoidberg and a $7 donation from Rob Scott. Thank you for your donations to the channel, and they are very much appreciated. Next up, we have a $6 super chat from Gustavo Palos, who says, have you seen Schulz of Germany, his stance lately? After agreeing on $1 million in military aid to Ukraine, now he's trying hard to ship it only in 3 months.
Interesting. I have not actually been keeping up with a lot of external politics outside of Ukraine, particularly even American or German politics, or even French politics for that matter, or really the entire Western world as a matter of fact, because there's so much news going on in Ukraine on the actual front line that the actual politics of what's going on outside of it, I just really can't even touch on, because if I try to, then I'll be losing a lot of pertinent information about what's actually going on in the front lines inside of Ukraine. So I thank you very much for the support, but unfortunately I haven't heard about that. And if that is true, I don't really like that at all, because that support is going to arrive so late that it won't even matter. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that, I'd like to make sure, just to make sure, because I think you did miss one there for a second, I would like to recognize a $7 donation from Rob Scott. So I think that Matthew may have missed that one. His files are incomplete over there because his computer went through a psychic meltdown. That's what he gets for using a Mac. But anyways, thank you very much for the support, Rob. It does help us to continue to run this channel. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next question.
And let's see here. Next question we have is from the British Perspective, who puts in a $6 donation and says, does rainy weather and clumpy mud best suit the Ukrainians or the Russians?
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I like the name. That's a very interesting name. But to answer that question, muddy weather actually benefits the Ukrainians the most, because the Ukrainians don't use a large amount of armor. Most of their forces are infantry-based, at least compared in figures to the Russian military, and the Russian military entirely focuses on armor advances and armored waves. So the Russians require large amounts of open dry fields to be able to move their forces through, because tanks are most effective when spread out instead of having to drive in a column down a road. So it actually benefits the Ukrainians a lot, because the Russians are stuck in the worst case possible, where all of their armored forces pretty much have to be stuck on the roads only. So I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question in brief. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next one is from Muskrat82, who's a longtime channel supporter. He says, can Russia afford to burn up equipment at this rate and sustain a long war while defending their country?
I don't think. Can Russia afford in defending their? I don't think Russia's defending their country per se. For the first time, I actually have Matthew's spreadsheet, and it's actually updating live, which is interesting. So I can actually reread them. But I don't think Russia's defending their country. I think that may actually be a typo. But I don't think the Russians can keep this up for long. We know already that they've lost some, I think, 1,400 tanks? No, I'm sorry. More like 900 or so, I think. It's very close to 1,000. But that is at least 10% of their armored force, and probably a sizable amount that are actually still operational and not in some kind of supply yard just rotting away for decades. So I thank you very much for the support, but I don't think that they can last much longer with the kind of losses that they're enduring. So I thank you so much for the support once again. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And just so everybody knows, I do have most people's super chats in the spreadsheet now. I've gone back and added a bunch, and we also have plenty to get to, so yours is probably up next. Next up, we have one from Trevor Smith, who says, the 25 BTGs would require at least 18,000 pounds of food per day for their soldiers then. That's 9 tons of cargo daily just to feed the Russians.
That's true. I actually did do the math a long time ago on the actual amount of weight a Euro 4320 can carry, and I think it's somewhere around 16 tons. So that would be about half of a Euro 4320 used just for the food alone. But that doesn't include the ammunition and the parts that take up a lot more room inside of the rest of the Euro 4320s. We actually figured out a long time ago that if a BTG had to be completely resupplied, like if they had to get everything, all their ammunition requirements, all their food, water, gas requirements in a single day, that convoy would be around 30-something vehicles long. And then we actually confirmed later on that the Russians actually needed about that much fuel per BTG, because we saw multiple videos where exactly 9 Russian fuel trucks were all in the same convoy and they would all be destroyed, which tells me that the 9 vehicle figure as far as fuel needed for a single BTG was actually accurate at that point. So I thank you so much for the support, and I can agree that that is a huge amount of food. 9 tons of food is massive. It's probably enough food to feed a cruise ship. Well, probably a cruise ship for like an entire voyage. But I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a super chat from Dino Ress, who's a longtime channel supporter. He says, smoke rounds designed to disrupt imaging from thermal seeker are in missile warhead.
Very interesting. I do think I did know that before. It's just something that I haven't actually thought about. But I do thank you very much for sharing that information with us. And so I thank you once again for the support. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a super chat from John, who says, do you think Ukrainian offer money to the Russian soldiers to give up would work? I don't think they would want to fight anyway.
I don't think it would work. I think we've seen the Ukrainians actually try a lot of things that are kind of similar to the Chuhoi in a way, the Chuhoi program that was used by the U.S. in Vietnam, and I just don't think it would work all too well. First off, they would have to cross a very large area, and it would be very clear to the Russian commanders that that soldier was deserting, and then they would have to turn themselves into the Ukrainians without getting shot in the process by either side. So I think it would be pretty tough, and a lot of people would think the odds of actually surviving through trying to do that would be pretty slim, if not impossible. But still, I think it's something that would be better than nothing, and I do think that it would be effective to some degree. I just don't know by how much. But I thank you very much for the question and the support, and it does help us to continue to run this channel. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a super chat from Ann Towner, who says, is it true Finland brought farming tractors to the border in response to Russia doing military practice by the border because of the bid to join NATO?
I don't really know about that. I haven't heard anything about Finland sending tractors to the border. If they did, I wouldn't doubt it, because we've seen a lot of things like that, so it wouldn't be too far off kilter for what's going on these days. But unfortunately, I haven't seen it, so I'm going to have to plead ignorance on that one and say no. But if that did happen, that is pretty funny in a way. So I thank you so much for the support. I hope I did answer that question at least in brief, and unfortunately, I don't have a lot of info to really talk about it. But with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from William Allen again. Thank you very much for your continued support of the channel. He says, did you notice the Azov on the left side of the video with the RPG?
I did not. I don't know which video you're talking about in particular, but unfortunately, I think you may have been talking about the one where they attacked the civilian convoy. If so, I think I did. Well, we can actually go back and check, I think. Let me go see. Let's go through that video and look. Hopefully this is the right one. Nope, that's not it. Let me find it. I think it's this one, actually. Let me check. Yeah, I think it's this one. We'll check it. Skipping through to about right here. I think this is the point. I didn't see one. If that's the specific part of the video you're talking about, I didn't see them. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to say no, because I don't know which video you may have been talking about, and if that was the one, I didn't see it there. But thank you so much for the support. It does help us to run this channel still, and so it does mean a lot to us, because it pretty much helps me keep doing this as a job. So I thank you once again, and with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a question from longtime channel supporter Diffuse56, who says, do you think the start of the Donbass offensive is going any better than week 1? Early days, of course.
I don't think it is. We haven't seen the Russians in the past 24 to 48 hours make any significant progress anywhere along the entirety of the front line, although we do have reports and information to show that the counterattack, well, the offensive, is underway 100% at this point, but we haven't seen anything to show that they're actually making any kind of meaningful progress anywhere at all. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a question from Yo Soy, who says, keep up the good work, good information, and a good dude.
Oh, thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do think I am a good dude. So thank you once again, and I'm glad that you do enjoy the content. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is another super chat from John, who says, Ukraine need to offer money for Russian commanders and soldiers who give up.
We actually saw one just like that earlier, so I guess I could say, since it's got a lot of popular backing here in the stream, yeah, I mean, like, it would probably work. I don't know how well, but it could be something that they do try, and maybe the money reward would lead them to divulge some information when they surrender. I'm not entirely sure, but I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up is a question from a very long time channel supporter, That Frost Wolf, who says, if anything can possibly take out Putin, do you think he deserves to die for all the damage he's done with this war? And what would happen if he did die?
Well, I thank you very much for the support, That Frost Wolf. You've been here for quite a while. And to answer that question, I think if anyone did take out Putin, it would be deserved. Because look at the sick stuff he's doing right now. You can just, like, that's obvious. He doesn't deserve to live after a thing like this is over. But to answer the last part of that question, what would happen if he died? I really think, honestly, someone would just step up and try and rekindle the flame and keep everything going the way it was before he died, and maybe even try and make the whole entire thing about avenging his death. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a way, at least as far as my opinion is concerned. But then again, take it with a grain of salt. It is just my opinion. But I thank you once again for the question and the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a super chat from channel regular Vicious Tuna, who says, Boo had $2 left on a Google Play account.
Boo. And I thank you so much for the support. Any amount of support always helps. Because the only way this channel runs is on viewer support. We don't run any ads or anything because I don't like them and they're annoying, and I would rather sync than run ads, honestly. So I thank you all so much for the support. It does help us to keep running. And with that being said, hey, $2 is $2. So I thank you once again. Any amount helps. And once again, if y'all would like to support Ukraine, there is a link in the description below where you can go and support charitable causes that are operating inside of Ukraine. And so I thank you all once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have one from Honest M, who says, tanks are booted and towed like parking authority.
I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't seen that. But I remember way back at the beginning of the war, the Ukrainian police actually pulled over 2 Russian tanks. And I think they arrested the crew. It was a really weird occurrence on video. But I do thank you for the support. And if that is a joke, that's a pretty good one. So I thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And I want to recognize a $2 donation from J.M. Pickering. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. Up next, we have another question from William Allen, who's absolutely killing it with the super chats tonight. He says, did he have on red slippers?
He did. I know which one you're talking about specifically. The guy who got apparently hit in the back. Yes, he did have on red slippers. They looked like the kind my mom wears around the house, but she wears light blue ones, and those were red. That was really weird to me, and it looked really bizarre, but yes, he was wearing those. So I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you did notice that as well. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And let's see, it looks like we have about 7 or 8 super chats left. So the next one is from Bob A, who puts in a $10 donation. And it says, according to Ukrainian news source, Ukrainian farmers have planted around 70% of their fields. How this grain can be shipped is another question if the war persists. Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini. And yes, it is a good question of how it will be shipped, but I think in a large amount of areas, it will be shipped rather safely. We know up here in the northern areas around Kyiv and Sumy and everywhere in between, we know that area is incredibly safe now. Minus the munitions that have probably been left over by the Russians. Here in the southern area, that may be a different question, but I think for the most part, the Russians would leave the farming side of things alone, like they already have, because, you know, that, of course, would be probably detrimental to them as well, considering I think they get a lot of their food from the Ukrainian farmers, although obviously it probably wouldn't be shipped over there considering they're in the middle of a war. So I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question in a way, or the comment in a way. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next is a $12 donation from Simon Gardner, who says, interesting to see that Ukrainian farmers have planted their wheat crop. Your footage shows grads being fired in a planted wheat field.
I think we actually had this one before. I think this may be a duplicate. But nonetheless, I do thank you for the support, and I do have to say, it is good to know that the Ukrainian farmers have continued to persist in their work and make sure that their fields have been planted, because I think they know how important Ukrainian foodstuffs are for the rest of Europe. If they weren't producing that food, Europe could start going into food shortages. So I thank you very much for the support. I'm glad that you did notice that. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, just let me know if any of these sound familiar, because I've gone back and recovered quite a few of them, so they might be duplicates. Up next here, we have a $10 donation from AC, who says, Mr. Enforcer, could you please tell me if Odessa is a safe city on the new Russian attack?
Yes, it is a safe city. Due to the anti-ship missiles, I think the Russian fleets have withdrawn from the Black Sea to a large deal. At least they've withdrawn farther into the sea. And so I don't think they'll be attempting to launch an attack on Odessa, because considering that their flagship, which was most heavily protected against anti-ship missiles, was destroyed by anti-ship missiles, goes to show that none of the ships in the Russian fleet are safe from anti-ship batteries. So I think that they're entirely safe as of now, and considering that it's been 55 days of war and we haven't seen them launch a naval invasion yet, unlike Mariupol, which had a naval invasion launched within around the first week or so, tells us that the Russians will probably not try and attempt one unless if the situation becomes incredibly different down here in the south. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from longtime channel supporter BC Skyman, who says, I've been here with you for over 50 days, and you've done a great job. Does Ukraine have enough troops to stop Russia in the Eastern Front?
I thank you very much for the support. And 50 days is a long time. We're about to go on 60 days. And honestly, at this point, I don't know when the war will end. I used to say that it was going to end in some weeks, but honestly, it doesn't even look like there's an end in sight anymore, as in most wars. And I once again fell into the typical historical trope where everyone went, "Oh, it'll be over by Christmas," and then it's not. So I thank you very much for being here so long and watching this news. But to answer that question, yes, they have enough troops. They started off with around 190,000 in the regular military, which were contract soldiers. Now they've bolstered those numbers with territorial defense forces and volunteers from around the world, which we know number in the tens of thousands at this point. So to answer that question, they may actually outnumber the Russians down there at this point if they've moved most of their forces that way. So I hope that answers the question, at least in brief. Of course, we don't have exact numbers on Ukrainian forces and how many are down there, because that would give the Russians an advantage if they already don't know that information. So thank you once again. I hope that does answer the question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next is a super chat from Darren Bostock, who says, could cluster munition systems be modified so that they can deliver supplies able to survive delivery by cruise missile, etc.? Some examples being MREs, medical supplies, etc.
I don't know. I mean, like, that'd be something that a techie would have to look over, a technician or something like that, to see if that would be a possibility. I mean, like, I wouldn't say it's out of the question. I'm sure if there is a will, there is a way. Most of the times, weird improvisations are made that are incredibly successful, so something like that could work. But the question is, would Ukraine want to waste that much resources, to launch in a small amount of supplies that missile would be able to carry and pray that it lands within the Azovstal? That's something that would be another question. And you'd have to look into the store of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that they have that may be modified that way, and how long it would take, and how many supplies could be shot in that way. And I think if you went through crunching all of those numbers, it would just seem uneconomical and not really worth it to undergo that kind of effort. But that's my opinion, and take it with a grain of salt, because honestly, it could be incredibly easy to do, and they may be looking at doing that already. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And just real quick, this is a message for BSG Wolf. I just want to speak it instead of having to type it. It doesn't look like I have been able to recover your super chat, so please put it in the regular chat and just put @EnforcerMatt, and I will make sure to read it off here in just a moment. And once again, sorry for the issues there. Up next, we have a super chat from Cesar E. Lopez III once again. He says, so for someone who plans to go out there, what kind of Glock do you recommend to get some practice range time that's available in Ukraine?
Yikes, that's a tough one to answer. I don't know what kind of Glocks are in Ukraine, and I don't know how readily available they are. Also, Glocks are a very, very common modern pistol, but honestly, I'm not too huge of a fan of them. I don't like the fact that they don't have a safety, and also, whenever I shoot them, I'm just never really accurate with them. That's just me, though. A lot of people are incredibly accurate with them and swear with their life by them. But honestly, I'm actually much more accurate with the 1911, oddly enough. And a lot of people complain about it because they're like, oh, it's made of steel that weighs like 3 pounds. The range floods, they use them in 2 World Wars. I don't really care about them winning 2 World Wars. I mean, like, that's a cool side note. They didn't really win them. Like M1 Garens and 1903s and 1917 Enfields and stuff won World War I and World War II for the United States. Not a pistol, but still, I like the 1911 more. But honestly, the most capable and best Glock, if I was to say that there was an incredibly good one, is the Glock 17. It's kind of like the standard run-of-the-mill Glock. It can be chambered in 9mm, which is an incredibly common round, I think, worldwide. And so, if one was to get a pistol over there and they just had the entire Glock assortment to pick from, I would say the Glock 17 would probably be the best one. So I thank you very much for the support. Once again, I'm not a gun store salesman or sponsored by Glock, just making that clear. But I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And I want to recognize an $8 donation from FPV1. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. Up next, we have a super chat from Honest M, who says, I think Russia is trying to connect Donbass from Mariupol to Odessa and from Odessa to Moldova, Transnistria.
Yes, that was what it looked like they were trying to do in the first place. I'll just, in my usual fashion, I'm just going to draw because drawing is very fun and very educational. This is what I was thinking the Russian front line would look like in some time. Russian, and we'll just put that. We'll change the color to red. Fill it in. That would have been their dream front line down here in the south. They would have controlled the entire coastline. They would have had a connection to Moldova, which is another neutral country, which they could say is full of fascists and stuff and invade as well. And so they would have been in an incredibly good position there. The thing is, though, is that they ran into a million problems at Mykolaiv. First, everything started to fall apart logistically. All of their supply bases got attacked behind the lines, and so that started to throw a lot of wrenches into their actual offensive. Second off, the defenders of Mykolaiv held incredibly well and didn't allow for any kind of meaningful encirclement to happen of the city. Also, the Ba River made sure that that was never a possibility because the river's current is so fast that they could never construct any kind of bridges over it and then cross it. And also, it's an incredibly wide river as well. So those two things together pretty much made the entire offensive heading towards Odessa collapse was just from the one area of Mykolaiv alone. So I hope that answers the question. And I thank you so much for the support. That's what I think they were going for, but in the end, they weren't able to do it. Also, there's another nuclear power plant. I think it has 4 or 3 reactors somewhere around this area. And that was something that they also looked like they were vying for as well, because that would have given them control of a large amount of Ukraine's power grid. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next is that super chat from BSG Wolf. He says, will Russia strike NATO? As it seems, Russian propaganda is testing the population with blaming NATO for the loss of the Moskva.
I don't think that they would. That would be very short-sighted and stupid of them to do something like that. Once again, I'm not saying that the Russians wouldn't do something as stupid as that. Their government is really stupid and incompetent, but to do that would be suicide for them. There's no way they could win a conventional war. They may win in the short run, like in the opening weeks of fighting, because, most of NATO wouldn't have mobilized. But once the United States pretty much pushed in most of its military power in pretty much the Western Front, they would just start pushing Russia back uncontrollably, and the Russians would never be able to get a handle on it. On top of that, the United States and the rest of NATO would just pour into Ukraine and then start pushing the front lines there as well, which would threaten Volgograd, which is one of the most important strategic targets that the United States could capture, because it would give them control of everything upstream on the Volga. So I hope that addresses the question in a way. I don't think the Russians would ever do that. They may be blaming NATO, but then again, Iran blames the United States daily for every single problem it has, including stubbed toes. And we don't really see them, attacking the United States directly ever. So, that's kind of what I'm basing my assumption off of, is that historical fact. And also North Korea says, oh, we're going to kill the Americans every single day, and then they never do. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a way. I'm sorry that got missed for a second. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Fat Daddy, who says, a little clarification on the flagship and a fleet. The flagship is where the overall commander put his flag, and it's on the biggest and best ship of the fleet.
Yes, that is true. And I think I did say that a decent amount when I was actually talking about the Moskva in general. That is the truth. The HMS Victory was the best ship in the Royal Navy, and so Lord Horatio Nelson. I'm not really sure if he got his lordship before or after he died, but he's still called Lord Horatio Nelson. He was on board the flagship, and he was, of course, the commander of the fleet that went down to Trafalgar and fought the Spanish and the French down there. So, thank you very much for the support and giving us that information. It is, of course, good to know, and good to always recap, because I don't think I've said that for a while about the Moskva and its status as a flagship. So thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And now we have a $10 donation from Samulus, who says, the Azov with RPG is the one you said, no, not that one. Oh, and Chebriki is a Crimean national dish, not Russian either.
Wow, do the Russians have any kind of indigenous food? I mean, like, honestly, at this point, I think we need some Ukrainian restaurants here in America. But honestly, I feel like that's a Seinfeld episode thing, like with Babu, where Jerry Seinfeld was like, Babu, you need to make this a Pakistani restaurant. He sat at the table, he's like, I'm so good, I'm so nice. And he did all that. I feel like, honestly, a Ukrainian restaurant would kind of end up that way, but I would honestly love to have some Ukrainian food nearby, because from what I've seen, it looks really good. They've got borscht, they got shebereki, probably shashlik. I don't know if that's Russian or Ukrainian, but still, nonetheless, it sounds like they got a lot of good food now. And also to circle around to the first part of that question, the Azov with RPG is the one you said, no, not that one. I don't know which video that was, though. I do say thousands of words, tens of thousands of words every stream. And so, unfortunately, I can't remember which video that was on. But I do thank you for the support, and I do hope I've addressed that question the best I could. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next is another one from Sweaty Chungus, who says the Russians could substitute wood blocks for food. It probably tastes better than their pelmeni. Slava Finlandia.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I do like the comment there. I do think that the Russians would be able to enjoy the wood chippings a lot better. I think that it would probably soothe their stomachs a little bit after the radiation sickness that they've endured, probably in the exclusion zone. So I thank you so much for the support, and it is a pretty funny joke. I do like it. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next is a $10 donation from Turbo B18C1, who says, proud owner of 2 Ed Brown stainless executive elites, a 45 auto, and a Wilson Combat stainless close quarters combat elite, and an LES Bayer hard chrome SRP. That being said, I ain't no hater of fantastic plastic, aka Glock.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and that is really cool to know that we have a lot of 1911 fans in here. One thing I like to make clear, though, is that I don't hate on any guns. I really like all kinds of guns. I mean, like, I'm not like one of those people, like, there's these people at gun stores, and I kind of find it to be weird, honestly, that they have all these guns for sale, and they'll have like a Henry lever action, a model 1886. And I'm one of those people who just like old guns, like I could get an MG42 or a lever action. I'd be happy with either of them, really. And so I could be like, oh, cool, look, it's a Henry. Can I see that real quick? And then they'll hand it to you. And like, I would use it for plinking at a target shooting range or something like that. And while I'm sitting there looking at it, I'm like, wow, this is a pretty good. They'll sit there and be like, it ain't good. Let me tell you something, son. You want to defend yourself in your home? You want to kill all them, party A or party B. I've been in both situations where they said either one. You ought to get yourself this here semi-automatic replica MP5, and I'll be like, yeah, but I'm just, like, it's a gun. Like, I'm like, really, the lever action is actually kind of nice, but getting beyond that, I don't understand why there are these people in the gun community who diss on guns. Like, I like them all. Like, I think there's redeeming qualities about all of them. Like, hell, if you gave me a Martini Henry, I'd be as happy with a Martini Henry as I would be with an AR-15. Not saying it's as capable or as good, but I like all kinds of guns, so I don't ever diss on any of them. So I'm not a hater of Glocks. It's just that I'm not really a huge fan of them either. But if you gave me one as a gift, I'd gladly take it, and I'd use it all the time, at a target range or something. So I thank you very much for the support. And also, it's really cool to know that you got those kinds of 1911s. Honestly, I don't have one, but if I did get one, I've always been eyeing, and I know it's a cheap one. Don't diss on me for this, but an Auto Ordnance 1911. Let me just get past the parts piece. Let's just go to the Auto Ordnance part itself. This one, it looks like a government issue 1911 from World War II, and I'm a huge fan of that. I just like the classic blued steel kind of look. I just like it. I don't. Like there's room for the engraved like 1911s and stuff, sure, because it's kind of a work of art. But I do just like the simplicity and the rugged durability of this Auto Ordnance's 1911 look. Although I've heard that the firing pin is a little weak in that one. But I thank you very much for the support. I hope that addresses that. I went down the rabbit hole on that one, but I thank you so much for the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And our last super chat of the night is a $4 super chat from DeView Smile, who says, the idea of Russia getting away with all that new land is making my blood boil. I really hope Ukraine is able to get those areas back, but I doubt it.
I think that they will be able to get the land back. We see that their counteroffensives in a lot of areas actually make progress. And so while it may take some time, I think they will actually be able to push back, the Russians a pretty decent bit. They might not be able to take back all the land, but they'll be taking back a reasonable amount of it. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we've answered all of the super chats for tonight. We're actually going to put a cutoff because this stream has been going on a long time. It's about to reach like the 3-hour mark here soon. So we're going to answer 3 questions from the live chat, and then we're going to move on to the end of the stream, actually. We're not moving on to anything beyond that. So with that, on to the first question.
So our first question from the live chat goes to Woody Stems, who says, Enforcer, have the Russians used their very best tanks in this new assault? Do they have enough trained crews to operate them?
We have seen them using some of their best tanks. We did see that captured T-72B3 today, which is, in definition, one of their best tanks. And so, yes, we have seen that be the case. I do think that they are running out of trained crews, most likely, but as a whole, they still have at least some modern tanks to pull on. So I hope that answers the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next is a question from longtime
one second,
channel
Matthew,
supporter.
my headset just died, so give me just a second. Stand by, everyone. Sorry about this.
We're having wonderful technical difficulties tonight. Please bear with us.
1 second, Matthew. Just waiting to... All right, so I think should be able to hear you now. So talk real quick.
Can you hear me, Enforcer?
I can. All right, and on to the next question.
All right, so up next we have a question from Gabby B, who is a longtime channel supporter, who says, have you heard any more on what's happening with the 2 British men Russia has as prisoners of war?
I have not, unfortunately. I did see one video about that, but I haven't really watched about it. I haven't watched a lot of it or any of it at all because I just kind of like, well, they've surrendered. And honestly, if they surrendered, you know, they're probably being coerced to say all kinds of stuff. You know, they're probably saying the Russians have super UFOs and, you know, they're going to shine the lights down on the Ukrainians and kill them all. You know, I mean, like, they could be saying something like that because they're being beaten in their cells to say something like that. So, unfortunately, I don't really follow that all too much, but I thank you very much for the question, and I hope that kind of answers what I've been looking at it as for a while now. But I thank you very much once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the last question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to get in a question?
And before I say who that person is, a quick shout out to 2 people real quick. We have 2 of our fans here that are competing to be the last super chat of the night. We have a donation from Speed Break, and we also have a donation from Andrew Andy. So both of you are the winners tonight. You both got to put in some of the last super chats. So thank you very much for your support of the channel, and we truly appreciate it. The last live chat question of the night goes to Diogo Jose Texera da Silva, who is a longtime channel supporter as well. He says, what are the Russians' motivations for securing this barren radioactive area?
The motivations for them securing the Chernobyl area, at least at the start, was that they didn't know if they were needing to create fallback positions or defensive perimeters if the initial offensive or the counterattacks afterwards that the Ukrainians launched made them fall back or be stuck in the Chernobyl area. Also, again, it is usual and very normal for units when they stop moving to start digging in and preparing defensive locations so that way they are not as easily picked off by artillery fire or anything like that. So it's just kind of standard drill. And on top of that, they don't actually teach anything about Chernobyl in Russian schools. So most Russian commanders and probably a lot of the Ukrainians, well, not Ukrainians, the Russian soldiers as well, probably had no idea that Chernobyl was even radioactive. And so they just started to go through their normal drill of digging in and making sure that they had some decent defensive position or that they'd be protected from artillery. So I think that's the main reason why those dugouts were kind of created in the first place. It honestly seems to me like they may have been completely ignorant about the dangers of the exclusion zone, and so that's why that was overlooked. But I hope I've answered that question pretty well, and with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. So I thank you all so much for watching. Once again, we will be coming on every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war, and we will be running our usual Sunday fundraiser this upcoming Sunday. So I hope y'all all have enjoyed tonight's stream. Make sure to subscribe if you did enjoy, and I'll see y'all all around in the next episode. So I'll see y'all tomorrow. Thank you very much, and take care.